We're on. It's 7 p.m., 1900 hours for those military time
No,
people.
you're on, I'm not.
Call the Town Meeting Act Review Committee to order. First item, and as I told you about this, we're ready to go. First order of business is review and approval of meeting minutes from July 13th and 27th. So I'll give everybody a little chance. I think these ones have been out here for some time, so.
I'll make a motion to accept them as written.
I can't second, that was not.
You can second the first one, but you can't second the...
Okay,
Yeah, let's do one at a time. 13th?
You weren't here.
No, I wasn't.
So we're doing the minutes from the 13th?
13th, yep. Minutes from the
Are we on the
13th first.
13th?
Yeah, 13th.
13th, please.
If you were on the 13th, I wasn't
That's what I thought.
You
in on
weren't
the
here, yeah,
13th.
you weren't here, so you can't, you could, but it wouldn't count.
It wouldn't go.
Right.
I move to accept the minutes as written on July 13th, 2017.
I can second it.
I have a motion and seconded to accept the meeting minutes as written for July 13th. Any other further discussion from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? You got one abstention? And we'll move on to the
move
27th.
Accept the minutes of July 22nd, 2017.
So on July, the minutes for the 27th, number 4, Al Holman expressed appreciation for Blythe Robinson's written opinions and asked that we send a thank you letter to her. I just want to comment, I want to thank her too. I have a written letter that I just want to submit from myself in response to her written testimony. I don't need to read it out loud. I just want to submit it for the record, so it's just a response, because it was, a lot of us started her assistance, so I just leave that for her.
It'll be in the minutes?
Yeah, it'll be the next 7 minutes.
Okay.
I'll have Deb send it out.
Have you, did you write a letter?
I didn't write a letter. Any other questions about? I had a quick question about 63 through 73. I want to make sure that that would be motion 6. We tabled that, Deb, and I want to make sure. Yeah, table further. Okay, I have no other further questions. Thank you. Any other questions on the meeting minutes from the 27th? So I have a motion, I don't have a second yet, to accept them as written. As soon as somebody's ready to go.
Second it, because
I wasn't there, so
I wasn't here.
second it.
I wasn't here either.
And down to the 4 of us.
She's
at
at
the
the
right-hand side of the table.
I was here.
I can second it. so I
There you go,
can-
you were-
Hey, we have a second.
Looking through them, I'm trying to make sure.
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor for accepting minutes as written, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And,
One minute.
oh,
We accepted something to be added to these minutes without reading it.
No, that's to the minutes next time.
yeah, next time.
You mean the letter?
The letter, so they're submitted.
Yeah, that's in the next.
Okay, so I'm
Just
not-
submit it.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
you're not accepting it.
I'm not accepting that letter.
That's,
It's given tonight.
I will.
Okay, very good. So abstention? We have 2, right?
Except
2
both abstained.
abstentions.
Yep.
yeah,
We were not
4.
here.
that's
not-
okay.
That's
We have a
not,
quorum to open the meeting, but the votes can be less than.
yeah. So, thank you for clarifying that. Okay. So it brings us back to,
I have a question.
yes.
Are you going to write a letter to Blythe, please?
I had written her an email. I have not written her a letter yet.
Okay.
But I did send her an email, and I really had said kindly that it was great that she had.
It should be a letter.
Okay.
The formal communication is by letter.
I can
Super.
send her a letter.
Doesn't have to be
Oh,
long.
no, if I'm encroaching too much.
No, no, you're fine. I got
It should always come off, it should come from the chair. That's the way it should.
I'll make sure I have this out.
I did actually thank her a lot for
No.
providing written testimony in addition to showing up and participating in the meeting and stuff. It was very
Yeah.
helpful.
I know it says it on the last one here.
Okay, we're on item number 2. Committee to review and identify specific sections of Town Manager Act to be reviewed in detail by the committee based on feedback and information collected to date. Again, it's a continuation of the item we had from last meeting, which was the 27th.
Like on 150.
Actually, that wasn't our last meeting, that was our last full meeting.
Finished 115?
So we left off with lines 63 through 73 tabled, and then we had left off at
114.
No, a little further along.
We went through all the stuff on, what was I?
115.
Yeah, we went through 115, we talked about the same thing, disabilities, all that stuff. was
I think
referred
117 was where we actually stopped.
to. Okay.
So what I want to do for the committee is go back and open up 63 through 73 and see if there's any other questions. I know from the minutes, myself and Debbie had made some comments regarding the 15-day period.
Wait a second, we closed that one, didn't
No, that was one that was tabled, 63 through 73. That's the 15-day period about appointments, disciplinary action, or termination.
we? That's a matter, didn't we say that that's already in the,
Yeah, but I think I'm going to try to pick up, Debbie, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I know we talked about a different time. That was one of the items that Blythe had said, hey, maybe 15 days. Should there be something different there? I know that and since that last meeting, I had gone through and looked at 3 or 4 other town manager acts that I could get a hold of through the reference materials. I looked at the town of Cohasset, the town of Hanover. We already have West Newbury's, we already have Groton's charter. And it seems like that 15-day period, it seems pretty commonplace. So I didn't see anything different
Yeah.
from that time-wise. I think the bigger discussion was about this item and where we were left off at 108 through 112 was more of the issue about personnel bylaws alignment and the grievance process, which kind of touches in a couple of places also, so,
Bylaws need to be reviewed
right, that's what we said, yeah.
because they're not accurate.
Yeah, the bylaws need to be, personnel bylaws.
Right,
Right,
yeah.
so that was a discussion we had. Yep,
It's on Steve's recommendation,
Right.
so.
yep.
So you all set with 63, 73?
it's tabled to get feedback from the personnel
Well,
committee.
it's- yeah,
I guess the question is,
Personnel are going to take a look at the bylaws and make the bylaws,
Yeah.
make sure the bylaws are consistent with the Town Manager Act. Right now, they're not. We have some inconsistencies between the personnel bylaws and the Town Manager Act. It makes sense to update those. And that the personnel bylaws are really kind of a living document anyway, because
Yes.
we make modifications to them all the
Town
time.
meetings all the time.
Right.
Yep.
every year there probably is something going on. It
Which
seems
makes
like there's
sense.
A lot of footnotes.
And that makes sense.
Sure, yep.
Another reason to review this document on a regular
So, we're good
basis
with-
so that it's consistent.
So that would pick us up, we're, like you said, 114, 115 was the other one we were
No,
talking
we
about?
ended at 114, 115,
Yes.
we're on to 117.
117.
Yep. Serve town resident with disabilities and affirmative action officer, administrative town administrator. Well, there are 2 choices, there's 2 choices here. They can serve as that, but the Board of Selectmen can appoint an individual to that position also. But for the lack of having anybody appointed, then the town manager would act in that stead.
I guess-
Mendon has a disabilities person, that's
Separate.
Kevin Redden, right, separate.
Okay. So I guess the question I would have for the committee's consideration and discussion is, what you just said, Al, makes sense to me, but since it's written into the Managers Act specifically, there's really nobody but the manager to serve in that role.
Well, the manager,
the way our
Yeah.
act's crafted.
Well, right.
Nobody else can be that person other than the town
well,
manager.
the town manager could appoint somebody or assign somebody to that responsibility or hire, bring somebody on board, a non-paid person to be a representative to handle that too. That would be under the auspices of the town manager. But it makes sense to have that, control, in my mind, independent of the town manager or under the auspices of the town manager, but independent from the standpoint of having somebody who's responsible for that clearly, that reports to the town manager.
If I remember right, one of the reasons that was being put in there was that we couldn't get anybody to serve as anything.
We had one for a long time, and then we just can't get anybody to serve. So that way, the space doesn't go, the responsibility lies with the town manager, that way it doesn't go away. So there's a go-to person for that responsibility.
I would be of the light that I'd suspect, that you wouldn't want anybody ever to be a volunteer for that position. It would be a position that would be compensated because there's a lot of legal rights and responsibilities that go with it.
Not necessarily. Because it's really, the issues that are at hand really are under would be filings and someone to make sure that they comply with the Disabilities Act, but also the building inspector has that same responsibility to make sure things comply with the
Just for
disabilities.
permits and construction, he wasn't.
Right, and that's,
He or she-
and building inspector. In other words, if the building inspector came in this building and it didn't comply with the Disabilities Act, he could write that person up. And theoretically, could refuse, not allow them entry or use of the building. Theoretically, the building inspector can do that. So
Yeah,
it's really kind of an interesting situation. The disabilities person representative is one who will look at a building also and say, gee, does it comply? But the building inspector also has
Yeah,
that
that's very
same responsibility.
specific. This seems like it's the town's affirmative action program, so what does that encompass?
That's a whole nother
Good
piece.
point, but every year, the employees have to sign a letter of understanding of that very issue.
So it sounds like you need to have somebody who knows the breadth of what that encompasses.
Well, that would add another position.
Right, and so does the town manager currently have that type of experience?
Oh, I would guess yes.
So it seems like it makes
Most-
sense to have it under him.
Yeah, right. The town manager would understand that, would be able to understand and would be the one who would have to resolve any issues that had compliance issues. So, in my mind, it sets in the right spot.
Yeah.
That's in my mind.
Yeah. I don't think it could be a volunteer position or, somebody can't sort of haphazardly know about that.
Unless somebody was specifically knowledgeable in that, and the town of Mendon, the person that's responsible for it is also handicapped, so they understand the rules and regulations, and besides that, Kevin is all kinds of stuff. And we used to have somebody here that was involved, chairman of that committee, before we got this.
Yeah.
That's why we have a ramp going up to the
Nowhere.
school that is 3,000 feet long that nobody's ever used.
3,000 feet.
Well, it's not 3,000.
It's quite
but it's
long.
long.
Yeah, well, we also have a
212.
ramp going up to the
Tough.
soccer field that doesn't fall under the regulations that can't be used now, so. So I think having somebody who actually has
Well,
experience.
the building inspector,
That's
actually,
his.
the building inspector's responsibility is to make sure that things comply.
Right.
And so if
Correct.
it doesn't comply, then the person who's responsible for that compliance, or making sure it complies, reports to the town manager. So when all the smoke clears, you go to the town manager and say, gee, that doesn't comply, how come it passed?
Yeah,
So that does, in an indirect manner, fall under.
Well, certain things, when you get into design and construction, like with the building official, that person's accountable to somebody in Boston. The
Right.
Massachusetts Act
Yes.
Architectural Access Board, MAB, it's been the same guy,
Has
Tom
to be
Hopkins,
stamped.
forever.
Has to stamp it, that it complies.
That person would be the person that makes a ruling through the building official on
Right.
something like that for new construction. If something was an existing one, that becomes a little more of a, either way, I think we're talking about all those positions are covered by the town manager or direct report.
I think this should.
Yes.
I guess the question that you brought up, Al, that I want to make sure I understand,
The onus needs to be upon the
Because-
town manager.
the way the act's written, does that essentially mandate it has to be the manager? Or is the act written in a way that the manager can delegate that role or responsibility? That's, I think,
Well,
one of
the
the things that,
responsibility falls on the town manager, period. If the town manager has the authority and the responsibility, that's what this gives him.
yeah,
He could, I would seem to me, he could have somebody, he could say, by the way, you're in charge, you're responsible to oversee this, but the authority
Yeah.
lies with the town manager.
Yep.
The buck stops
And
with
so what
him.
you'd have to do is pull the authority
You can
out.
say him now.
And then you'd have to change, you'd have to have a bylaw change that would include it would include and give the authority to a disabilities person, somebody's responsible for that. And I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense in my mind. It makes things a little convoluted.
I just want to make sure, because I went back to look at line 58 through 61, which said anything related to section 4. It says the manager shall be responsible and accountable to the board for the efficient and orderly conduct of the departments and functions placed in his charge as a manager for the proper execution of the following powers and duties. So is everybody in the committee comfortable that that essentially gives the manager the responsibility to,
Oh,
by
absolutely.
default,
Yes.
if there's nobody appointed,
He's
Yes.
got it.
Yes,
he or she has it,
Town
yes,
manager has it.
yes,
or in this case, okay.
yeah.
I'll second
Any other
the motion.
discussion on 117?
That's, nope,
No.
I'm good with it. So we check that
So we'll check that one off.
Done.
Let's go to 120 and 121. And I'll make sure I read
Compensation of town officers.
so people know what we're talking about. That line was held and it said, fix the compensation of all town officers and employees within the limits established by the Personnel Board, the relevant body, and the appropriation.
Town officers, non-elected officials. Which, I mean, that makes sense.
Who are the town officers, like DPW director?
DPW director, the chief of police,
Senior.
you senior, yeah,
Okay.
fire chief, yeah.
Yeah, all the appointed people that work for departments.
Right, yeah. Remember, when you say establish, that means they put it in the budget, but what happens is the governing body votes on it, so,
I
right.
mean, the town meeting.
Yeah, governing, public
So-
governing body.
So the end of that sentence, the relevant body is the governing body,
Right,
the voters,
right,
and the appropriation is what's approved at town meeting.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
And is there selectmen oversight on that one?
The selectmen look at it. I mean, they don't submit the budget. They write the warrant. The warrant is the responsibility of the selectmen. Nothing gets put on the warrant that isn't approved by the selectmen. So the governing body then gets to vote on it. The only way to get something on the warrant is if a group of people put together a petition. And then whatever is written in that position, word for word, paragraph for paragraph, period, commas, everything.
Right.
Spelling mistakes goes on the warrant.
So actually, that brings up an interesting point. So I was told that everything that goes on the warrant needs to be in by September 28th by the new town manager. So does that mean our work here, whatever we're bringing recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, we have to give them some time, they then have to write something up to put it on the warrant by the 28th? Or is it because it's the Board of Selectmen, they have till a later date?
The Board of Selectmen close the warrant. In other words, they open the warrant and then they close the warrant. Once they close the warrant, nothing can be added to it.
Okay.
What they can do is, and we've done in years past, is we've had a special town meeting that had 2 or 3 articles on it before the annual town meeting, or before a meeting. So, and they can call a meeting anytime. So, you're right, they were,
But so we should be back timing from that.
we need to know, we need to understand when they're, number one, when they're closing the warrant, the last warrant that we can put any recommendations on. You're absolutely correct.
Right, so I was told it was the 28th by Derek,
Of September.
of September.
So then we need to back in, you're right.
We need to back in from there because, and I wasn't sure, and I didn't ask him at the time, that's why I was thinking with you guys, with all your knowledge, could, if this, then do the selectmen, you're saying it is closed on that date, which is what I thought. So they then just have the information and what's there is there and
Right.
gets put on. So they need some time
To look at it.
to say yay, nay, because we're
Number one.
recommending to them,
That's
they
number one,
decide
right.
what, right? And then they can put it on by the 28th.
That's number one. But
Yeah.
number two is, and this would be, if I was sitting in the selectmen's chair,
Yeah,
this is what I would say. If there are any changes to be made, this will be a significant issue. And that should be on the annual town meeting, if it was me,
okay, not for,
I would agree with Al completely.
not for November.
not for November.
Okay.
But we need to have our stuff done long before
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
definitely.
I think end of October is a good time frame. That gives them the time to review it, make changes to it, say, gee,
Okay.
this is worded wrong or whatever, so it can be done in the right way. So my belief is that we should be completed with what we have to do by the end of October.
Okay, to go for the annual meeting.
Go for it.
Okay.
That would be what I would do if I was a selectman. Now,
Well, I just thought the time frame seemed like it was coming up really fast.
Yeah.
I would agree with the
It's too little
discussion.
a time for us to operate within that time period. But we have till the annual in May.
Yeah.
This would be, it's good for us, because this has to be approved. Whatever changes we have, or suggestions we have,
Right.
will have to be approved by the selectmen.
And we'll also go to
And
council.
also
Town
the
council.
attorneys,
Yeah, right.
our attorneys. Then, once it's approved, or not approved,
Yeah.
once it's approved, it goes to the Attorney General.
Right.
Then, again,
Well, the
Right.
Attorney General won't give us a decision until after it's voted.
that's correct.
So the Attorney General doesn't look at it until after it's voted, but it gives the selectmen time to look at it, to make any changes that they want to make to it, or say, gee, I don't like it, I'm not going to put it on the warrant, or whatever. Or they can send it back to us and say, don't agree. I mean,
Yeah.
but it gives them time.
Al, I think you brought up a very good point, which is, this is something significant and structural. You got to give the voters some time to see it, understand it, digest it. So whatever we would do sets the stage for what would be done between
I
our
think,
work finishing in October and the annual town meeting.
I think our timing should be such that we give a target date that we're going to complete, a completion date. Then we need to send it to the select and say, we'll be done with our recommendations on this date.
Yeah.
And
So
then-
the things in there, in the minutes that said off going to town council, there's a few things town council is going to look at. Do they have a date in which they're going to come back with an answer for us, or how does that work?
Well, we have three things, quick knowledge, that we have
Question.
a couple of things for the selectmen.
Yeah,
We have stuff for the personnel board, which has gone through a complete change up, right? Do they even have 3 people yet? And they would have,
Two, I think.
they have 2, so they have to,
Two.
you'd have to have a third just to have meetings.
No, actually, there's a 3-person board, isn't it?
There isn't a third person.
No, but what I'm saying is a 3-person board.
No, it can be up to 5.
5.
Okay, well,
But you certainly would need 3.
yeah, they can have a meeting, just 2 of them, but also
Yes.
the selectmen are
Okay.
by default members of the personnel board.
They can.
Okay, so that doesn't help out. Good.
For
I
years,
just wanted-
they only had 1 or 2 members.
Yeah.
I do
It was a
remember
while ago.
quite some time
They
when
only had 2 for a long
when
time.
Chairman Fleming was serving, I
Right.
think, multiple.
And then Bob and I
Terms.
joined, and it grew from there.
Yeah, and Bob and I were on the personnel board for a while.
so then just get back to my original, then there'll be a point or where we need to get information back from, like, those boards and town council. Have we set a date, or are they just gonna, do we have an idea when we're gonna get it?
What
Or we're
we need-
still going through this, we might have further questions for you.
Yeah, what we do need to do is we need to send a note to the Board of Selectmen with a target date saying, this is when
Yeah,
we're
time.
gonna be done.
Yep.
And oh, by the way, there are some information we have currently requested that be checked with town council and what those items are. And then where we're at right now, we can send them a copy of this saying we've gone down through line, whatever it is, so they know exactly what we've gone through.
Yep.
And that way, they're briefed on where we're at, and we can give them a target date, which gives them the planning ability. Okay?
Yep.
I think.
Just for the committee's perspective, I talked briefly with the new town manager, Mr. Brindisi, kind of give him an idea where we're at, where we're up to, and then that we were going to be reporting out once we get through the lines to the selectmen. Like I said, I think we're all in the same realm on that target. I want to get back to this one,
Yes, sorry.
these sections.
Yep.
It was a good point to be brought up, a little bit of a tangent, but I think good discussion. 114 and 115, I know one of the things that has been brought up was, we're back up to all town officers.
Is
The
it-
manager is the town officer, so I think that's been one of the things that
No,
has...
the manager reports to the Board of Selectmen, so I hear what you're saying. It may sound complex, but my guess is that the town manager can put whatever number the town manager wants to put in there. But the Board of Selectmen are the ones that have the final say on what's in that budget.
Correct.
So whether the town manager puts in their number or doesn't put in their number, that's going to be negotiated and set by the selectmen, so by the three selectmen.
So the question I have for the committee that I want to bring up is going through several of those acts we pulled. A lot of those acts specifically say that the compensation of the town manager cannot be exceeded what's approved at town meeting. So I think this goes back to a discussion that has been contentious. I don't think it doesn't necessarily have to be, but of course, anytime you talk about compensation, including the compensation of the highest compensated officer in the community, you're gonna have that as a point. So I guess the question for those held lines is, do we look at a few of the acts like Groton, Cohasset, and there's one or two others, I think Hanson's the same way, where they explicitly say that essentially that the compensation essentially has to be approved at town meeting before you go
But
forward.
that's the way we govern.
Right.
That's like saying, the bathroom is closed and having a sign on it that says the bathroom's closed. It's saying the same thing twice. The budget cannot be affixed until the governing body votes on it. That's every line in the budget at town meeting. So when you say that it has to be said at town meeting, that's the way we govern. So that's like saying the same thing.
I just bring up a point that's, for some reason, a lot of other communities felt like they had to have the sign that said.
Like a double
what you
negative.
just said.
I don't understand why they did that. That would seem to me that they, Now, if you have a mayor, or you have a town council,
I also bring that up too because the town of Sterling just recently had an issue with their town manager where the selectmen out of cycle went to change the compensation and it resulted in a recall of 2 selectmen. So I look at that as like, boy, you don't want to have a selectman make that mistake.
well, they can't do that. I mean, bottom line is, they broke the law.
Correct. They actually,
Selectmen can set any salary they want. Town meeting has to approve.
Right.
Town manager, everybody.
And if you've ever negotiated, which we have negotiated, say, a police chief salary or a union contract or anything,
yeah,
you do that in secret. I mean, you don't.
executive session.
In executive session.
Absolutely.
And then you're sitting on pins and needles because now you take that to the governing body to let
If
them
they
vote
say
on
no.
it. If they say no, you're really between the rock and a hard spot, and they can't. So the final word on any salaries is at the town meeting.
Is the salary a specific line item? That, like, sometimes
Yes.
they group, it's groups, but
You
that's,
can hold any item in.
right, but it's not like
Yeah,
grouped in,
yeah, it's
right?
in the selectmen's budget.
Budget.
Yeah, it's called salaries or whatever, and you can hold that
Yeah.
and then ask.
And then, okay,
And that's why some people get really upset when somebody holds 92, 93.
right,
And then you have to stop and take them one at a time.
right.
It really can be, some years back, we used to go through the line items and the salaries too,
Yeah,
line by line. And that got to be very
Painful.
troublesome. Because then you have people jump up and say, I want my salary to go up. But
Don't they don't group the salaries?
No. we
no,
don't.
you can look in the budget, and there's a line, if you look
yeah,
at
it
the
says like
budget.
town hall, right?
Right, and you can look at what everybody makes, that's a matter of public record.
Yeah,
But when we go through it at town meeting?
Well, they do it in hunks, you have wages and salaries.
Yeah.
And then that breaks out, and then you have everybody that works there. So you can look at that if you want, but
Yeah, the budgeted amounts there.
generally speaking, the personnel board really, with the exception of the DPW director, the police chief, and the fire chief, are really in tune with what everybody makes. And then everybody gets a line, everybody gets a budget and gets to look at it and say, gee, why is this one gone up 10% or 21%? And then you ask the question why, so.
And they do a compensation,
Right.
survey every 5
HRS.
years.
Mhm.
So every position is essentially reviewed, graded,
Right.
and given a range. So-
Yeah, and then
Every department head has to go to personnel board
Right, to change.
and change any salary.
if you want to change your salary, it has to be within the range. And then if you want to give them more than in the range, then you have to re-justify and re-describe their job, so it includes more significant things, so they can bump up ranges.
Right.
Yeah.
It is not,
Formula.
yeah, it's not just given.
Yeah,
It
right.
is.
Oh, yeah, right. They need an increased job
It's
responsibilities.
bureaucracy at its
Right.
best.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Maybe that's why a lot of communities just put it in a sentence in their town manager act,
A lot of towns,
to keep bureaucracy simple.
a lot of towns just vote the bottom line number at each department. They don't go into any of those details. I mean, we're kind of in between.
Small communities, I can see it. Like I said, I'm like, it's one of the smallest communities I've lived in my entire life, and yeah, it's
Okay.
a few places. So, any other questions on 120 and 121? How about 123 through 124, which I will read out loud?
No, I think that one's already, that's,
Administer all applicable general and special laws and all applicable bylaws and regulations and implement all lawful goals and policies established by the board and provide reports to the board when appropriate.
which is a good description of what the, what the job entails in short order. The good news is, and I'll be honest with you, it's always been a question on who enforces the bylaws. It's always been an issue. You go to the selectmen, they're supposed to be responsible for the bylaws, but this really specifically states the town manager is responsible for the bylaws and everything else. So if there's a problem with someone making a bylaw, you know exactly who you have to go to. So I think that that particular section really clarifies a lot of things that have been kind of iffy, not iffy, ambiguous, that's what we're like, ambiguous. That makes sense?
Administer all general laws, that's the mass general laws, correct?
Yep.
The special laws,
Special regulations.
you want to give some examples of
Which
that?
is, yeah,
But that's a good one, I don't know what a special law is.
no,
Would that be the act?
No, that's a, no.
That's a legislative act.
That's a legislative act, which is, actually is a law. But, yeah, it's an act of legislation. No, any special laws, I don't know what special law would be. That's probably just to cover everything.
right.
A catch-all?
A bucket to cover everything else.
That's the bucket. If it ain't covered in these, it's covered in that one.
And all applicable bylaws.
All applicable bylaws. You wouldn't want to enforce a bylaw on a liquor store that had to do with stop sign, would you?
So applicable basically is just
Applies.
our town bylaws
That applies to the situation.
and regulations, so like the sign bylaw. And all lawful goals. So the question that I always had, the question is, why the word lawful goals is in there?
Well,
Lawful specifically.
lawful, well, if it's issued by the Board of Selectmen or the town manager, or the governing body by a bylaw change or by an action of the governing body or the voters, then they would be responsible for enforcing that, making that happen.
So I know that, I know I held 123, 124, and I think a few other people did. I only held that because I've been looking at other communities, I had seen different language. We're the only one that has lawful goals that what you just
Right.
explained makes sense. The
Well,
word
they could
lawful.
assign, to sweep the front steps. That might not be a lawful goal, a lawful.
Well, I mean, goals, I guess the question was, is, what's a lawful goal?
Right.
I don't,
I don't know what a
it
lawful
doesn't
goal
make
is.
sense, really, to be
No,
honest with you.
goals are not
Goals can be unlawful.
legal. They're not legal, they're.
Well, yeah, but
Lawful
you could-
policies, I
You
think.
could ask the town manager to do something that was illegal, then it wouldn't be a lawful goal, so.
Correct.
So that's all lawful goals, that covers them, so they don't tell them to do something that's illegal. That's another bucket. Make sure that we don't ask them to do something illegal.
Well, we said some of the same communities that we've had brought up as an examples talk about faithfully executing all
Right.
Board of Selectmen goals and objectives. So I think that's an example of,
A different way of saying it.
well, like I said, I don't think the word lawful makes a lot of sense in front of goals. If somebody said lawful policies, I wouldn't have any,
Well, if I told the town
I'm
manager,
parsing like
you're right.
a coding standard writer, which I use, said.
If I was to say in a lawful, I could say to the town manager, okay, I want you to make sure that the drug delivery gets paid. Well, that wouldn't be a lawful goal, would it?
No,
No, I want you to embezzle $3,000 from me so I can go to Bermuda. Well, that wouldn't be a lawful goal. So I think lawful goals is a bucket to make sure that anything they tell him to do or ask him to do by dictate or direction is within the law. That makes sense to me.
So this to me is one of those kind of cut and paste. It's just, those cut
Yeah, I
and
think-
paste. It's a cut and
I
paster.
think
So,
I cut and paste it on there.
so what if we, in a little more layman's terms, to see that all laws, this charter, bylaws, and other town meeting votes and directives of the Board of Selectmen that require enforcement by him or officers or employees subject to his direction and supervision are faithfully carried out. So we're getting everybody in there. We're getting the laws, our charter, bylaws, other town votes, town meeting votes, directives of the Board of Selectmen. So that would sort of encompass our top chunks. Directives of the Board of Selectmen that require enforcement by him or officers or employees subject to his direction and supervision are faithfully carried out. So that is an idea of a change that's encompasses but is
A little more,
Less vague.
less vague.
less
Yes.
vague and pulls in verbiage from Groton, from West Newbury, from other towns within the information we were given through the Mass municipal government, as opposed to,
Lawful goals.
yes, lawful goals, there's, special laws, we're saying directives of town meetings, what are things we vote on, bylaws, the charter, this, all laws,
More specific.
directives of the Board of
Specific.
Selectmen,
Less vague.
specifics more related to our town.
But
Just a thought.
this particular line, these lines say the same thing.
Wow.
They are very vague.
But sometimes it's best to be vague.
Well, when you say vague, it covers all the bases. Is there any base that line, those two lines don't cover?
Well, vague,
Three line chart.
vague also gets you in situations sometimes when you're having a disagreement, it also opens the avenue up in the other direction too. So
Well, I'm-
vague can work with you and against you at the same time.
All I'm suggesting is that section, those three lines describe everything you said, only in a lot fewer words.
Well,
Are there any bases that are uncovered?
but the verbiage is a little strange.
Yeah, it might-
Lawful goals. I mean, things like this are, documents like this should be living documents. There shouldn't be such adversity to change that.
This one isn't a
It
living
takes so much
document.
to change it.
So this is.
Bylaws.
So this is an opportunity because this was put together, taken taken from somewhere, and there was a lot of cutting and pasting done to put it together. So this was the first shot out the door. So I think that, you know, as a committee that was put together to take a look at it line by line, now is a good time to make sure that it's clear and that it says what it's meant to say. And so if something is a little bit unclear or kludgy, I think it's appropriate to make it clear and less vague.
What I would suggest is that we ask the selectmen to look at that particular paragraph and have town council look at that particular paragraph and see if it is.
Well, we just make a suggestion. They're going to have the opportunity to say yes or no.
So just a point of clarification for everybody in the committee, we're pulling these from approved legislature, approved attorney general, approved town manager acts of other communities. So that's an example of language that's already gone through another community.
Right.
It's already
Yeah.
gone through the same process.
This has been
Yep.
approved and it's
Yes.
been
Right.
7 years.
And it's
in our book.
going to be it's going to be a suggestion that they can,
So what I'd recommend is, if you want to make a
Approve or-
motion to
Yeah.
offer up to that language,
Put it in the minutes so we can all review it.
Okay,
Yeah, we need the wording.
so we need to vote on this.
so we need,
No, we can't vote on it until we read it.
Okay,
So put it in the minutes. We'll
so
vote
let's make a motion to put it in minutes.
so we'll make a motion to put new verbiage in for lines 123 to 125 under
on it.
M.
123 to 125, which
Yeah.
is probably going to be more than a couple lines.
It's 3
Sounds
lines.
like. No, I don't
Yeah,
think
3
it's gonna be
lines.
I don't think it's going to be 3 lines.
The new verbiage, I think is, well, we'll see.
How many lines is it in that other?
Yeah, it's
4. Is it? Am I looking at the wrong one?
Yeah, no, here, it's
Oh,
only.
yeah, it's
only
3
two-
lines.
Yeah,
3 lines.
but it's only 3 lines. It's only probably gonna be 3. 3 for 3.
You got it written down?
I do.
Oh, good. And you can give a copy to
Give a copy to Deb?
Just put it right in the minutes. As a matter of fact, if you could, separate this out from the minutes as a requested change. That way it's simplified. I mean, so much stuff I really should be aware of.
So
Alan's
are we
not
not
here.
gonna be able to vote on anything then? Or we're gonna have to review and keep reading and we can't say we wanna have them, they vote on it to have them take a look at it.
We
Why don't we
can,
make a vote
you can make a motion to vote on adding it.
Why don't we make a vote on it?
Right,
And you're gonna review it.
Right.
for the next meeting.
next meeting, right.
Okay.
That makes sense. That way.
Well, I'm just wondering then, if we're gonna do that for every line, how are we gonna move forward and get stuff done?
Well, it'll be in the next meeting, then we can look at it and say, yeah, that's good, or
Didn't you vote on
Okay.
changing?
then we'll have the written
Then we'll
words
have the
in front of
written,
us.
and then we're gonna debate.
And then we can make
Yeah, I just
changes.
wanna-
There may be no change.
Right, just in the
That way.
best interest of moving us forward as a
Yes.
group. I know that things were approved, the meeting I
Right.
wasn't here,
Were
motions
we-
were made and
things-
things went through
Right, so why can't we do
with the,
that
with the
this?
verbiage, so I'm just wondering, this is I know it's a change, but
Change the verbiage.
There were
We
changes
did
made.
make a
Not
couple
change
changes.
There-
verbiage on most of the stuff.
We did on one.
Well, we changed the C to some, what was it, a C to a D or something?
Yeah, that was an editorial change.
Yeah, we haven't made any.
So we haven't made
So
any, we haven't
maybe
made
then-
any verbal change, we haven't
Yeah.
made any wording changes.
Okay.
This will be the first one that we're proposing
Oh,
to make
okay. As a wording.
a complete
as
wording
opposed to,
change.
I see, okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think that's good. You need to
Just
read
to
one
keep
more
us
time, just to,
moving. Yeah.
Well, that's all, we
And
just
look at
hold
it,
it.
and then you can look at your other charters and compare and then
We can
some
hold
of
it in
the-
advance
yeah.
and make sure it looks,
Perfect.
that we understand it, makes
so
clear.
if you
and
can
then we
just
put
make
it
sure
down.
that Deb
Yeah.
has that.
Because as far as I'm concerned, one of the people that is one of the best legal minds in Worcester County is not here tonight. And
Scott?
that is,
One of the best minds, huh? That's a pretty,
well, I didn't make that up because I got it from the DA of Worcester County.
okay.
We are fortunate to have two lawyers on our committee, which is a very good thing.
Yes.
Who's the other lawyer? Oh, that's right, he's
Yeah.
police officer, but he's not a practicing lawyer.
Scott's a lawyer. Okay.
Well, always practice.
I think he
Practice
is.
law, so always practice.
All right.
Okay, so 123 to 125, we have a proposed,
And it's on hold with a proposal.
it's proposed for action on the next meeting.
Yeah.
So we're at lines 135, 136, 137, and 138
127.
That
on
one,
the next held.
that one is, again, that, I
That's all
think,
union.
What was
Huh?
held,
That's all union.
127 to
Yeah.
130?
No,
yeah,
135, 136, 137, and
yep,
138.
that's all union stuff.
They're good with those.
Do you know who held that? or-
Based on,
I don't know.
we didn't hold those.
That's all negotiated.
We're just good with them?
Yeah.
When did we decide
That's
that?
right. That's right.
When we went through the lines.
Oh,
And again, no matter what's arbitrated, no matter what happens, no matter what happens there, any money spent in that agreement has to be approved by the governing body. So you can't spend any money unless everybody agrees to it. Unless it comes to.
So let's just go for a second. Let's go like we've been doing the other sections. So I'll read out the section from 135 through 138. It's only 4 lines. Serve as arbiter of grievances, chief union negotiator for all collective bargaining agreements under the jurisdiction of the board. The board from time to time may provide advice and guidelines to the manager. The board shall retain authority to execute union contract agreements.
There you go.
Not sure if this one, I know that I had flagged this one, because it only talks about our union employees, it doesn't talk about our non-union employees, of which I don't know what the number is. in-
Grievances for regular employees look like it's at somewhere else. Wasn't there another one that was
I think
grievances?
so.
No, I think
No.
that's,
This is the line.
yeah.
So, to be honest with you, Debbie, I think I flagged this, and I also had thought about, should I flag it also as, is it missing kind of thing? So I would agree completely with the committee from a discussion standpoint, I'll open up to discussion, is this clearly covers our union
Right.
employees
Right.
very clearly.
Yep.
Looking at some of the other acts that we've looked at for reference that came from MMA, it pretty much, one of the things that's unique about ours, it says is no matter what, it's the chief union negotiator. Several other acts that we've looked at talks about that essentially that lead role is the town manager, but it could be a committee or the selectmen as they so choose.
Right.
So kind of similar to what Al was saying. I don't know, I shouldn't take words out of it. I shouldn't make reference to you because you may not agree with me.
That's why
This
it's
may
called
be,
democracy.
this may be language that, when you look at some of the other communities, is written differently than some of the newer acts that we've been looking at. So, I know that from my perspective, I think that the grievance part and how to handle that with non-union employees isn't specifically covered by the act.
It's covered in the personnel bylaws.
Right, and that's a case where the personnel bylaws need to be reviewed. I mean, that may be something.
So, and that's covered in here,
Yeah.
Right.
so, I mean, everywhere. So,
Right.
So the question is, like I said, from that standpoint, I feel like that the non-union employees of the town, do you have similar language? Does it make sense to have similar language? One of the themes that's coming out is the act and the personnel bylaws not really being really aligned and coordinated as well as they could be or should be.
I can't speak for the personnel board, but my guess is that that was something that was never thrown on the table to take a look to see if there was compatibility with the town manager act and personnel bylaws. So if it
not
wasn't,
in my time.
yeah, and so if it wasn't thrown on the table, then no one ever looked at it to make sure everything fit. But now that we've sat down and looked at this, one of the major byproducts of this committee has been that the town bylaws, personnel bylaws, need to catch up with the town manager act. And I think that the byproduct, if nothing else, the byproduct of this committee has pointed that out in several places, which is a good thing.
Yeah, when the personnel board expanded, the town manager was already in place and had been in place for
And no one ever
years.
thought about
So
it.
why, why
No
would you
one-
look at it? You've got somebody in the position. It didn't seem like something to be addressed,
So I
so
think
it
this,
never was.
so I think the byproduct of this for sure is a good thing.
Like I said, I think from my perspective, that just to capture the notes, that it doesn't necessarily specifically address non-union employees is part of getting to that bigger piece of
In the
things.
act.
So from a, if the committee doesn't see a problem, I'd like to kind of put it in that same bucket that we've been putting together.
Yeah.
Related to personnel board.
Oh, absolutely.
Personnel bylaw.
Recommendations, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Does anybody see any other direction that, are there any other points that you think are valid?
A lot of work.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I would almost add in there, work in conjunction with the personnel board, so it's not just the one person, so it says in there you're working with the person, with the
On
personnel.
this one, on 35 through 36?
Yes.
No, that, you can't,
This is an interesting thing where there's, the board
Union
of selectmen and the
contracts.
manager really have the responsibility.
yes.
And I'm not going to go into the details, and Debbie could maybe share a little bit of her own personal experience, having just served for a decent amount of time on the personnel board. But there has been a lot of discussion about how the personnel board fits in their role, advisory and others, within the board of selectmen and the manager's office. I think
To your question, which is a valid question, don't make no mistake about that. The dilemma is that when you negotiate with the union,
And I totally understand.
You gotta-
I
you
totally
gotta have-
understand, and I
yeah.
think I'm hitting more on the non-union, and
Right.
I think, and maybe it just needs to be a little more clear. I think, and totally understand the union, I totally understand
Yeah,
that.
that
But just
one-
wondering if, and this is the only place here for it, is there a way we,
no, the grievance process is very specific in the personnel bylaw. And the dilemma is that,
We're not following it, but it's there.
well,
Okay.
and therein, well, there we go.
and one of the interesting points here is the responsibility of the town managers to make sure all the bylaws are followed, which would include the personnel bylaw. So it's restated here very clearly that, from that standpoint, the town manager needs to encourage the personnel board, and the personnel board needs to encourage the town manager to follow bylaws.
Where's that
So
stated?
135 through 136, let me kind of.
138.
138, sorry,
Yeah,
135
just
to
make no
138. I'd like to put in that same table
That goes in the
category
personnel.
that we've been
Yeah.
putting in. Because one of the things that's unique about ours is, we have a lot of personnel things that are sprinkled throughout that section.
So that the
Yes.
And
personnel,
it's not grouped, it's sprinkled throughout the act.
personnel board can look at it.
Whereas we've
and
seen
make
other
recommendations.
communities and other acts, and we're looking at
So-
examples.
Grouped together.
It's
But they
one or two
there's a lot of those for
paragraphs
that.
in one section and the
Yes.
rest of it
We
is
go
follow
in a
through
whole.
this.
She said it's not being followed through.
So,
Well, this
It's not
one,
being followed
this
through,
covers
then-
it all.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't,
it's just, it's not, it's
One of the-
just
One of the-
within the act.
well,
It doesn't have to be, it's just.
yeah,
the way
oh,
it's
no,
written.
I would say we wouldn't want to change the wording.
Exactly.
And if it was, if I laid it out different, I might have laid it out entirely different.
Yeah.
hold on for a second, let me get a
This-
couple conversations, because I want to just make sure the committee's all on the same page with
Yeah, let's
that.
leave that one alone. Just leave it alone.
I give the committee the same thing, as we all agree from the contract standpoint. I'm going to bring up one example where, it's probably not a situation now, but it's a situation that could happen 10 years from now. Different people in town officers, unions, and the manager in the future. What if the manager is a family, has a family member in one of the unions?
Guess what?
So the question is I look at some of the other communities and it says
You'd have-
the same language we have where it says that the
I
manager
absolutely
essentially.
understand the issue, and let me give you an example of what the result of that conflict is. Whenever you go to arbitration, whether it's a police arbitration, a school committee arbitration with the teacher, or whatever, if you go to arbitration for the police department, guess who's the arbiter? It's a former chief of police. Guess in a school committee arbitration, it's a former teacher. So even if you go to arbitration, you're going to get bias. Now, a town manager, under the guidance of someone, there's not a conflict there, I don't think, but there might
The
be.
board of selectmen actually executes the contract.
That's correct.
So there's
they can
oversight in
oversee-
that.
Oh,
Right.
no, here, personnel and personnel
So
matters.
the other communities that looked at, like I said, we have
I don't know
similar
what we did
language,
with this one.
other than it says ours shall be the chief
108.
negotiator, which I would agree, in 99% of the time, is probably the right person, except for these few exceptions.
But you see,
And it's gonna go to the,
town manager is an arbitrator. Good. But he makes no decisions. He goes back to the Board of Selectmen for everything.
Board of Selectmen are the ones
make
signing the agreement.
decision. The only thing that the town manager does is the nitty-gritty. We negotiated for 3 years a union contract. Now, that is 3-4 nights a week. It's ridiculous. You have the nitty-gritty done by town manager. The guy that works every day, that has a job outside the town, doesn't have to come here every night. He will listen at the end of the week at the selectmen's meeting, and
I would agree with you, Dick. I just was saying that other communities and other acts say the manager is usually first in line, or it could be a committee or approved by the selectmen, or even a legal counsel done by the
Well,
selectmen.
sometimes legal.
So there's a couple of
counsel-
examples where I think that language is a little different than ours
Oh,
in
I
some of
think
the other
it's-
ones, and I think it's probably trying to be a little more all-encompassing of some of those examples. So I don't think there's any disagreement
I
by
think this
by
one
the
works.
committee on what this is.
I think this one works.
it works. What works, sometimes it's best to leave it alone.
Painful.
Because
Painful.
we have selectmen right now that think that they're putting in a lot of time.
No, when you guys were running town without a manager, you put in a ton of time.
They're putting 30, 40 hours a week
Exactly. No,
at night,
Actually, the
and
school,
instead of working.
actually, the school committee puts in more time, but that's neither here nor there. Okay.
So my question
Leave it
is, I
alone.
just,
Leave it alone.
well, my question is we're not talking about anything with non-union employees, so it's.
Just leave
I
it
thought
alone.
didn't we want to have the personnel board look at it and maybe put in, address that non-union area?
I guess my question is I was asking the committee, do we put this in the bucket with all of the HR items that
Well,
Look,
I say yes.
to be looked at by
I
the,
think it
So,
just,
for non-union employees, not this, but the non-union employees section.
yeah, I think it needs to be addressed, I think. it's-
Well, that's part, yeah, that's, again, that's a review of
And
the
again, is it the
personnel bylaws.
manager, is it the board of selectmen? It's an example where that, the manager's role and responsibility isn't.
I would suggest that we put a note in that request that the personnel board review the agreement, this process, the negotiation process. But there again, this goes directly at union negotiations and grievances. It doesn't have
Right.
anything to do, nor could you interpret this to have anything to do with employees of the town. That's a separate thing. I mean, this really goes directly at union negotiations. So I think we've already said that the union,
Yeah,
the personnel board.
nobody disagrees with the union perspective.
Right, so then we could add a line, we could add some verbiage to that, that would address basic.
One of the things that might be helpful is to actually get a copy of the personnel bylaws for all of us. I mean, I know what they are, but just as to see what it covers, because it does cover quite a bit.
And it does cover grievances, and it does cover all that stuff. So, I mean, to put that process in there, that's described in the personnel bylaws and described on who has authority and what the
Right.
responsibilities are and what the structure of the negotiation and the complaint and how the
Right.
complaint process through the thing. So it really is covered in a separate section. So it really, this isn't the place to put it. I don't think. That's my opinion.
Any other discussion by the committee on that? I don't think anybody disagrees with the union specific.
yeah, no.
And I think that in the past few years, we have proven that this works. With many issues that have occurred,
Not easily, but.
it worked. It worked,
For non-union or union? you mean?
Yeah, I don't,
union and non-union.
Well,
I don't know, I wouldn't know about that.
oh, here's the thing.
that.
Here's the thing.
I
This is,
appreciate
this is specific language for union contracts, for union negotiations, because that discussion is not held in the personnel bylaws.
Right,
Right.
So that's
Union,
why it has to
correct.
be, that's why it has to be in here.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Now, the personnel bylaws cover negotiations, grievances, and all that stuff, which is a different
But this is
set of stuff.
Yeah, so I think, I want to
That's-
capture that. I think we're on the same page, but Debbie,
So
brought up,
that's-
you know, we're very good at a point that we think that this is not, it's not addressed. And I would agree with what you just stated, which was, it necessarily hasn't worked out as well. I mean, people who have employment contracts usually have a pretty clear set of
Right.
guidelines. The people without employment contracts, I think, are in a different situation when we have this kind of, some of these disconnects.
That's where the personnel bylaws need to kick
That's-
in and
Right.
follow.
Right.
That's a
Follow.
that's a
Separate
it's-
thing, and it should be
Yeah.
carried out.
But is it
Town
And it's-
manager,
under
board of
all-
selectmen.
Is it addressed in
It's
here?
addressed in here
These
when
are the
they,
personnel bylaws.
and it's addressed on the response of the town manager to those
Right.
bylaws,
Right.
very specifically, that the town manager has to follow all the bylaws, which would be the personnel
Including the
bylaws.
personnel.
So if the personnel bylaws are a little sketchy, you rewrite those bylaws so then it's no longer sketchy. And if they're accurate and usable,
Right.
then it's, the bases are covered. Our charge is to look at this, not to look at the personnel bylaw.
Right, right.
Yeah?
Yeah. That's why I said it might be helpful to read it so that you could see what, and if you haven't already, what is covered in it.
It's really exciting reading.
Oh,
Yeah.
put me to sleep more than once.
But it doesn't say necessarily personnel bylaws, it's just bylaws.
No, it's personnel bylaws.
Personnel
No,
bylaw.
bylaw, it says bylaws, and then there's
It
a,
just says bylaws.
and then the personnel bylaw is the personnel bylaw, which is a
Stands by
bylaw
itself.
part of the town.
It's a separate doc, right.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, yeah.
It's a lot more what you would probably look at with your company's
HR
manual.
policies.
Like an employee
Yeah,
handbook. It's an
HR
employee handbook.
manual.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar.
It's rules you should follow.
Everything-
Exactly.
It's excuses.
What's the final
The
decision?
final decision on this, in my, what I think we come
Let it
to,
go, right.
is to let it go. We don't, this is, does exactly what it's supposed to do.
Where do we, okay, so where are we addressing non-union, or are we gonna have
The
the,
personnel
The
bylaws,
personnel bylaws, which is not part of our charge.
So for
108.
the meeting minutes, just
Oh,
reflect
108,
that we
okay.
will
108 to 112 really
We'll be
covers.
addressing
okay, 108,
this as part of the sections of the personnel bylaw.
okay.
Yeah, that's,
If you could just put a note that we have had specific committee discussion, that this is very clear for union, but not as clear for non-union, and that we are going to
Right, it's not
put
stated
that
directly.
in.
It's referred to, but it's not stated directly,
and
Not
it's,
stated.
no, it is,
through the personnel
it
bylaws.
says the, support the bylaws.
Right.
So it is covered. If the bylaw is screwed up, that's a different subject.
Right.
That's not what we're here for.
Right,
It's already stated in this, and we've already talked about it, that they have to follow the bylaws.
108 to
bing.
112.
And that's the personnel bylaws. So
Right.
if there's a problem with what's
Fair
going
enough.
on there, that's a subject for the personnel bylaw. Okay? Because it's already stated here that he has to
Yep.
follow the bylaws, or whoever has to follow the bylaws.
So I already told that.
So we want to say that it's very clear
Right.
about union employees and non-union employees, and we want personnel. to-
Refer to the other sections that we've already referring back.
Refer to the personnel bylaws.
Right.
Bingo, that covers it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we're moving
One
on.
line in there, yeah.
Line 145 and 146 were held. Receive, and the language of this section are receive and act on questions and complaints filed with the board or the manager, and inform the board of the status of the resolution.
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, I think it's straightforward. What do you think?
I think maybe it was held because,
Sorry about that.
This
It's
one I
not
think
me,
was held
so-
because I know, this was held by several folks, I think.
Yeah.
I think, I'll state the reasons I held it. I think this is an example of, a battery issue.
Here.
Did you drop something and did it break?
No, it's just my very loud
Okay.
purse.
no,
Sorry.
That's okay. I just-
I think this goes back to the
No
earlier
breakage.
discussion about communication with the board, accessibility with the board, having citizen direct access
right.
without having to go through the manager for everything. So I think that's where this was coming from my perspective.
Correct.
And I think there's times when, like I said, this goes back to and many times people will want to talk to their elected leaders about something. And like you said, at this point, not being a selectman, I know you're constantly getting bombarded and you're constantly being asked questions, but that's what goes along with elected office
And we
and
have-
taking that role.
We have that covered under our recommendations, right?
Yes, I think we already had that
And
covered in the
BOS
recommendations.
direct the town manager, have weekly office hours, the BOS have.
Yeah, and that's up to the Board of Selectmen to do that. I know one of the,
they did.
interestingly enough, when I first became a selectman, I thought that was a great idea, but I was instructed by the guy I served with that wasn't a good idea. So instead of doing that, if he saw me on the street, would ask me questions, so.
Yeah.
Now, other communities maintain a log of complaints and they submit like a regular written report. So, that's something that we could adopt.
Because we really don't know. I mean, how does the town know what complaints or anything that's, I'm sorry, questions and complaints filed with the board or the manager? There's really no way for anyone beyond the board and the manager
And
to
if
know
you-
about them.
Right.
Whereas a log, I guess, would be public record, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Is it an
That
official
would be.
complaint, Bob?
No, there is an official complaint law.
Discretion.
It's a discretionary thing, and my suspicion is that there might be some privacy issues that would be a little iffy if you made it a public record. Now, in the case of police log, that's a different story.
Yeah.
That's a matter of public record. But a complaint log for the Board of Selectmen or in the Selectmen's office, that might be a little iffy because there's some personnel issues, some personality issues, and there's all kinds of things that
Yeah.
would be in conflict. I
Or,
don't.
I assume if a resident complained about their snow plow, the snow plows
I'm
ruined my
telling you,
lawn.
I'll give you an example that happened yesterday, which I
Okay.
thought I had to laugh my ass off on this, excuse my French. I got a call from a woman who wanted Brian Murray's phone number from me. Brian Murray is a state rep. She wanted Brian Murray's phone number from me because she wanted to make a complaint about the hospital. And I asked her, why are you calling me?
You're supposed to know.
I'm going, oh, God, I can't believe it. So, a lot of people,
Maybe-
You were you nice and showed her where she can get that
Maybe town
information?
council could advise us on what could be done there to
yeah, the dilemma, yeah.
document it.
You're absolutely correct. If it's within the law, and there again, that would be, rather than change the act, there might be a request that we make to the selectmen that if council approves it, that the Board of Selectmen, suggest the Board of Selectmen that they keep a law.
Right.
Because if you put it in here, it becomes law, and what we want to do is the other piece of the puzzle. If it's not something you can do legally,
Yeah.
then the Attorney General is going to reject the whole thing.
So I'm going to go back because I don't even recall, but I do remember a brief discussion by a citizen at the end of June meeting, would have been the 27th, where they did approach the committee and gave us some feedback to the person that handed us the guidelines for committees
Right.
from another community. They're also one of the few people that had said, hey, I've gone to the manager's office and made some complaints. I don't feel like two things, that they were filed or acted upon or followed up on. And, we have no idea what the case is for that, but this is an example of,
And you know what the complaint is? I mean,
Right.
the complaint could be something really off the wall.
yeah.
And rather than make an embarrassing comment or embarrassing action or something like that, the town manager said, oh, thank you for the information, and I'll look into it, and then looked into it and didn't do anything. Trust me, every complaint that comes in is not necessarily from the same person sometimes, or the complaint is not.
No, I understand that.
So there's a case where you hope that the town manager uses some judgment and also has a good bedside manner. If the town manager doesn't have a good bedside manner, then it will create an issue. The act didn't create the issue, the bedside manner perhaps created the issue. So that's what we want to focus on the act.
Well, and also just being able to go to that next level. If you have a grievance and you go to the town manager and
If you have a grievance with the
kind
manager.
of poo-pooed through, and it says through the board, maybe that is like, thank you so much, Donna Marie, okay, we're gonna take care of that for you. And then I gotta go and find my selectmen, come
Well,
to the
then what you-
meeting, or have my direct email that I could then email them, that doesn't go through the town manager to say, oh, I already dealt with that, and so I don't have to.
Well, and that's a case where they always have public comments at the end of their selectmen. And so in that particular case, the suggestion is, if it's an issue that wasn't resolved, then you would go to that selectmen's meeting and then reaffirm that complaint or that problem.
See, one of the reasons the selectmen do not take a lot of these comments is that they can't do a thing about it.
Number
The
one,
town manager can,
Yeah.
because that's his job.
that's number
And-
one. And number two is, they can take no action unless they have at a meeting.
Correct.
So if you want some action, and you want the Board of Selectmen to respond to a complaint as a board, then you have to be at a meeting that they've established and posted. You can't call the selectman and say, hey, this guy's got a barking dog across the street and I don't like it. Call the dog officer. Oh, this person didn't mow their lawn. Okay, well, call the Board of Health, or call the town manager, and the town manager will talk to somebody. But that's why they refer you to the town manager. I know it's-
We're wandering into a little bit of a
And I-
customer
I
service
just
kind
responding
of
to
discussion.
citizens who approached me that said, listen, I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't even, and I have no way of getting to my selectmen because I work 9 to 10 and I can't get here to a meeting. I couldn't email them. I don't have their phone number, not like you guys in the old days. And I said, well, let's figure out how can we then get you a line. And even if it's something that's, and you're being heard, and then maybe that is something the selectmen talk about in a public forum, depending on what that is, but it's not, but you also said, okay, so it goes to, it's the day-to-day goes to the town manager, then where is but you said ultimately the town manager reports to the Board of Selectmen, then where is that oversight? If you have a log, the board, then how did you guys get in, well, you didn't have a town manager at the time, but what's the oversight then for the person that doesn't get their resolution if it stops with the town manager because we're going
Right,
to,
and it's
I'm just
valid.
saying sort of back and forth.
You were
We have to
valid.
suggest to the selectmen that they tell the town manager that
So-
they had read a lot of these complaints, a
So-
lot of
They go
these
nuts.
comments.
But that's number one. But number two is, you're absolutely correct. The same thing happens if I have a problem, let's say with the registry. I'll give you an example. If I want a handicap sticker for my car, you know where I have to go?
I know,
You got to go to Boston.
and it takes a long time.
And there is no choice,
That is
there is no
correct.
option.
Right.
You can make all the rules and regulations you want, but the bottom line is you got to go to get it.
Right.
And I suspect, and I understand people who maybe can't make the meeting, but if it's that big an issue, and if it's that significant to them, then they can say, okay, I have to go to that meeting.
So I guess the question comes down to, and I'm going to kind of bring back some committee discussion, try to coalesce this into a point, is I think Deb, you hit her on the money earlier on. This has been spot on about the communication part of it and not having that point. I think the second part, and Don Marie brought up the same point, I think the second part of it is a tracking mechanism. And in this day and age, I guess I would propose to the committee that we don't change the language specifically here, but we do make a recommendation that they look at policy and how that's handled.
Could it be handled privately? I mean, could it be handled between the two? Like, there's a log, but it's not a public log. It's a log of the selectmen and the town manager.
Once the Board of Selectmen talk about it at a meeting, it's public record.
So
My suggestion is,
Yeah.
this is my suggestion to a person that you described, is to send an email to the town manager requesting that it be copied to the Board of Selectmen, okay? So that
But
at
what
least,
if they're uncomfortable because they had a negative interaction and they,
well, if they have,
they want to bypass that and get to the, is
I
that our the separate emails we talked about? So
well, it's interesting.
you're agreed to this point.
Okay, and I
And
understand
so
that.
the town manager reports to the Board of Selectmen, so ultimately the citizen wants to talk to the Board of Selectmen, their selectmen.
I'll give you an example. I know, I hear what you're saying, but it's kind of like a ship, okay? And in a ship, when you're on a Navy ship and you're aggrieved or somebody does something to you, you can request captain's mast, which means you get to see the old man. But guess what? You never see the old man. You go see the XO. And the XO decides whether or not he's going to pass it on to the old man. So my point is that right, wrong, or indifferent, the dilemma with the structure of the management of town government is that we have a town manager, and that's the guy you first go to.
Yeah, no.
I know it may-
The
may-
But no,
person
but my
that
point
is
is
being overseen by the Board of Selectmen decides whether they're going to let you get to the Board of Selectmen?
That's,
I don't
you
think-
see it every day in a
You
secretary.
see,
Or go to a meeting, I
supposedly,
guess, and bring it up.
Bingo, that's the way you guarantee.
They didn't allow questions at the meeting I went to.
Say that again?
They didn't allow the
Citizens to speak.
citizens
Yeah.
to ask any
I
questions at
also
the meeting that I was
experienced
at.
that.
And the-
You
So
say
have
that they
you-
do, but they
And if
didn't.
they're not there the hour before, you can't get at the, so now
Well-
you've got your babysitter, you got here, so you could be your
So
brief.
let me give you an example.
You have to be on the agenda
So-
also, that's the
Yes.
trick.
Okay,
So-
so that's.
Trick is get on the agenda.
Here's a different experience in a different world. We have a very good representative, in my personal opinion, David Radian. I follow him on Twitter. I've actually handled him in Twitter, and he's actually messaged me and interacted with me very, very constructively and very effectively, quickly. So there's an example of like, there's a drastic change going
Stop
on
another way?
in the way things are being done.
I don't-
I think this committee's gonna have to
Hello?
really be, I think we're gonna have to put forward, this is gonna be a strong policy recommendation about how that's handled. That's my own personal opinion.
Also, you can email Board of Selectmen.
Once you do that, it's a matter of public record.
Absolutely. I know David Radian's Twitter is absolutely a matter of public record. And
Anything-
here's my example, is that there's newer ways of doing this, and I think this is an example of where it's caught up between the communication of them to the voters. They have the running the office day-to-day with the manager, and then a little more of a formality of a communication, and then also maybe even a logging process.
Well, I would say that a login process, I would be a little skittish on a login, but just because there are issues, I can think of several issues that you wouldn't want on a login. You wouldn't want on a complaint form. It would be, it would be embarrassing at several levels. And so, that being said, the dilemma you face is, and I understand, I can understand the dilemma of trying to get communication with the Board of Selectmen. I can absolutely appreciate that. You can't, in my mind, you can't legislate that around the workaround. You can suggest to the selectmen that they take a better action, or they be more engaged, or they listen to their constituents, or
Find new ways.
Find new ways to do it, but you can't legislate that. That's a matter of whether or not the selectmen are willing to participate in that.
Yeah.
And the town manager's job is to take those in. If the Board of Selectmen set a tone that says, hey, I want to know about these things, then they'll know. Then the town manager understands that.
Yeah.
But you can't legislate that. You can't say, all complaints will go to the Board of Selectmen along with the town manager. Then what happens is they become the town manager.
So let me give you another example that I learned about just recently was, I've seen two other communities now in their Board of Selectmen meetings that are every other week. I think it's sometimes every week, depending on the time of year. And no matter what, they have an agenda item right in the beginning where they allow the public to come in and say 5 minutes.
Right.
And you don't have to be on the agenda. It's just, I want to come and I want to ask you a question.
Right, and that's not on the agenda right now.
And we have never operated, well, I shouldn't say
It should be on
that.
every agenda.
We haven't done that, to my
The
knowledge.
school council, school committee has, on every single agenda, it's included.
The school committee strikes a different pose in this, so to speak. But I absolutely
But
understand
it
it.
shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to specifically ask for it
Well,
to be put
in
on the
point-
agenda.
In point of fact, if you want to speak, if you want time on their agenda, you have to ask for it.
But I mean, in
Unless
open
they do it,
meeting law,
I just-
they don't have to.
Unless they have a time posted for public comment.
So I think
We had this discussion long ago.
Well-
Our meeting is our meeting. We don't have to listen to anybody in the audience because it's our meeting, unless we say we want to hear from the audience.
Correct.
The same with a selectmen's meeting, same kind of meeting. But if you get on the agenda, in other words, if they call the town manager the Thursday before the Tuesday, was what we used to run, and you want to be on the agenda, you say, I want time on the agenda. Generally speaking, you will get time on the agenda. And now they can't say you can't talk to them because you're on their agenda.
Okay.
That's the way you guarantee you get your voice. And that's a fair and reasonable way if you.
Kind of bureaucratic,
Well-
to be honest with you.
Hey, I got a hot flash for you. This is called bureaucracy. That's the way. But if you If you want to follow the scheme, the rules, if you want to get your case made, that's the way to do it. You got to play the game their way.
Now, if you ask to be on the agenda, what happens?
Well, that's an interesting
They don't
question.
have to allow it.
And that's
Because
the thing,
the
they
guy
don't have
that's,
to-
That's actually where, I'll be honest with you, that's where the Attorney General's guidelines on this, they would be, and they could,
Might be
that
hard
was
for-
filed beyond the community, that'd be in trouble.
that might, that's,
That'd be
and what would
trouble.
happen is the Attorney General will come back and say, no, you got to put them on the agenda. If the person pushed it. If it was something that
So-
wasn't important,
So I think the good thing is, that I think the committee's exhausted this discussion point.
agree.
I don't think we're talking about changing any language, but I think that we're going to capture some of these key points.
did I give you some
Debbie's
ideas
writing
for that
furiously,
person,
which is
how
great.
to handle that complaint?
Is they need to look at new ways of communication and they need new
I mean,
ways
that's-
of
Direct
access.
communication with
And if they
I
want
mean,
to put you,
yeah, it's
it's a pain in the ass, I absolutely
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's more like, one person shooting, you know, there was, one person shot me down. I want to be able to have 3 people listen, you know, versus just one person, you know, and again, I'm just sort of bringing the voice of what our people are telling, this is their experiences. It's like, well, maybe there's a way, and then looking through, some other towns maintain logs. I thought, well, if there's a log, you know, but I agree it's other, you know, another level of things, and maybe you don't want to have everything in there. I do enjoy reading the police report because I see where the most tickets are given out, which is mostly Pleasant Street in front of MBTA. I go, "But you drive slow right there." It's like, oh, I get a big
Wow.
chuckle out of where they, you know, like I can tell my kids to maintain the speed limit, but
That's good, I like
they
that.
should be doing anyway.
Great, let's move on.
Let's go.
There should be an app for it.
159.
Well,
one
every once in a while, you get a new young selectman. And first, I've seen quite a few of them come
Thank
in.
God. But what?
They like.
Don't say
to
that.
Get that half hour or hour before the selectmen's meeting and hear complaints. I've been here sitting with many of them and just him and I talking politics. Nobody came in. I would say, when I was here, nobody came in. Maybe somebody did, but
They never
it
got
wasn't when
back.
I was here.
So is that the disposition on this one?
Yeah,
Yeah, just-
policy, we're going to give them policy, we're going to give
Just
some
a policy recommendation or something, rather than make a change.
communication and policy
Right,
recommendations.
so good. We're going to go back into the thing that's,
Yeah, we're back into.
So we're
the
back at
thing here.
159.
okay, good.
So lines 159 through 164 were held.
Review, approval.
And I'm going to read that out. It's budgetary powers and responsibilities. It's subsection A, prepare and present annually to the board for its review, approval, and recommendations to Finance Committee, detailed budgetary estimates of amounts necessary for the administration of all town boards, officers, committees, divisions, and departments under the jurisdiction of the board or the manager for the ensuing fiscal year, including both capital and operating items. The manager shall present a requested balanced budget to the Finance Committee.
Bingo. That's exactly the way it works. That's, I mean, that can't be more specific, sorry.
It's a request, and it's a budget
It,
request.
absolutely, the guys that had the final say on it are the Board of Selectmen. The town manager can put anything he or she wants in there, but the town manager only recommends to the board and they submit to the governing body. Oh, they submit to the FinCom who say, yeah, we like that, or yeah, we don't.
So this is one where we've had a couple holds on, it wasn't just one hold. Again, going back to some of the reference communities, this is a one year-over-year thing only. And if you look at some of the other communities we've looked at, Groton, Cohasset, West Newbury, and a few others, they talk about having more of a long-term range plan. So we don't have that in our act, we don't
What
talk about
long-term
that.
plan are you talking about?
5-year. I think 2 of the communities I mentioned have specific language about having 5-year projections,
Like the
Yeah.
school.
kind of looking what the school does, like the multi-board did for a little while for the school system, where you're looking out, not just next year, but you're trying to inform. So I'd open up any other discussions. That was one of the reasons I held it, is that we don't have that. And I think everything from the solicitation of our current manager we have, there was a lot of discussion about, a rapidly changing tax rate, yes, we as a governing body vote for all those things, and maybe it's like a good party, it's a hangover the next year after, that you're like, did I really vote for that? And why is my taxes this? Long story short, looking at several of the communities that we've pulled off from that reference MMA, there's clearly some direction in some other communities about the manager. And then even in some instances, those acts talk about the finance committee and the board of selectmen's responsibilities with a little more clarity. And I think Al, yourself, and Dick and Alan when he's here have been a wealth of knowledge about how, how we've operated as a town before we had a manager. But again, it's not codified specifically in our act.
Well, actually, the FinCom, the laws around the FinCom are very specific on how it works. So it's not necessarily town manager or town selectman's description, but the FinCom's description of how they operate is very specific. It's very accurate, very logical, makes all the sense in the world.
Is there a document that?
Oh, absolutely, go online.
Is there a website?
Oh, absolutely, you should be able to get that information. There's a training book on FinCom. Essentially what it is, and it's kind of simplistic, but what happens is, the governing body, the town of selectmen before would create a budget. And we used to have a meeting, God, I hated those meetings too. We'd have a meeting and go through the line item budget, every line with every department head and every person to figure out what it was, then we put together a budget. Now the town manager does that. And the law says the FinCom will receive a budget. They will make a recommendation, they will submit to the governing body their recommendation and the submitted request. And they will perform a report. They will produce a report. That's what the law says. The law doesn't say that the FinCom gets to tell you what to spend or what you can or can't spend. They get to submit and recommend. That's all. So really, whether you go to the FinCom, whether you go to who the selectmen are or whatever, the charge is the same. The FinCom, the Board of Selectmen's responsibility is the budget. Now, we've moved the responsibility for collecting that budget one level down. But when all the smoke clears, each one of those selectmen have to understand, should understand the budget line by line and understand where those things go. And if they have questions, they should ask, because once it goes to the town meeting, it's their budget. Now, you can say we want the governing body we want this person or that person to be more involved, but in point of fact, when all the smoke clears, as always, it's the responsibility of the selectmen when they put it on the budget. Now, we do have a capital committee that's supposed to put together a capital budget plan, which is the budget that you're looking out for. Expense budgets, that's tough to protect. The capital budget expenditures, we have a bylaw, it's in the bylaw, that we have to have a capital budget committee, and they have to do a report.
And that's a long, is that a long way?
Oh, absolutely, they have a 5 and 10, and I think right now, credit to the fire department, I think they're the only people who do one. A 5 and 10 year capital budget, capital expenditure. I think.
I've seen it. and
Oh, the
it's not-
police department
It's
may
not
do
us.
that.
It's DPW, fire and police.
Okay, so.
Put that together.
And so that's.
It doesn't go outside those three departments.
No, but it goes to the Board of Selectmen so they understand what's going on. And then they make requests relative to that capital budget plan.
But as a community, there's a lot more things than just DPW,
Well,
police and fire.
but, well-
I know we're the bigger three of,
So, and generally
government.
speaking, any department that needs something should look into what the capital budget plan and understand that. Now, the Board of Health, we never have anything like that, so it's not a big deal. But when we do go into negotiations for trash, then we have to understand what's going on in 5 years. But to that question, there is bylaw expression for a capital budget committee and a capital budget plan. So
So
that,
there's a current capital budget committee, or is it every,
yes,
there's one?
yeah.
yeah, but, yeah.
I'm not sure how active they are. I can't describe that.
Okay.
I can't.
Have you heard of it, or you be absent for them too? No.
Yeah, I think that's not a very active committee.
I
So I'm going to bring up a discussion point. I want to read from another community's point. This is coming from the town of Cohasset, and they say, under their financial responsibilities as town manager, like we have our section 5 too. The town manager shall submit to the Board of Selectmen by date established pursuant to subsection I of 3.
Blah, blah, blah.
A proposed written budget for the ensuing fiscal year. The proposed budget shall detail all estimated revenue from all sources, all proposed expenditures, including debt service for the previous, current, and ensuing 5 fiscal years. The proposed budget shall detail all estimated expenditures for current operations during the ensuing fiscal year, detailed by agency, department, committee, purpose, and position. In addition, the town manager shall prepare a written proposed capital improvements budget for the ensuing fiscal year and 5-year forecast.
That's a 5-year capital plan.
Yep, and include both as part of the proposed annual budget. So we're talking about some stuff that is an example of like,
But again, the 5-year, the capital budget committee and capital budget plan is in the bylaws, I believe. So it is covered, and it, as such,
I
if
don't
it
think we
is,
have forecasts.
But we're not doing it.
it,
We may not be doing it.
we may not be doing it, but if it's in the bylaw, the responsibility of the town manager is what? To enforce and follow the bylaws.
Right.
So the long and short of it, if the town manager follows all the rules,
So you think it's in the bylaws?
I believe it is. I believe the description of the
Of a
capital budget.
5-year
Capital budget
capital
committee is,
budget.
Yeah.
capital budget.
There's actually 3 or 4 more things, and I'm, to your point, I did go back and start looking at the bylaws, and this is where, going between our act and our bylaws, it's a little complex.
I won't,
No question, no
I won't
bones.
argue
The way it's written, you mean.
And I'm talking about for the Board of Selectmen, for the manager, and for the committees. I think there's a complexity here that can get a little difficult to follow.
well, what we've been going along for how many years is a town without a town manager, and then all of a sudden you put a town manager in and you give that town manager a lot of management responsibilities, and you've taken that responsibilities away from the Board of Selectmen. So there's going to be a lot of conflict, because remember, the bylaws were written around a government that was organized relative to having selectmen and no town manager. So every bylaw that's been written up until 7 years ago was written relative to the concept of having 3 selectmen.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, we put a town manager in, and obviously, there's going to be probably some duplication of efforts. I mean, duplication of rules and bylaws. I mean, obviously, the most casual observer, so to speak. And I think this may be one of them. This, as in some of the other stuff we say, that's covered in the bylaw.
So this town manager has to do a lot of cross-referencing.
Well, that's true.
To figure
That's right.
out what
And my guess is,
all the
the way it
bylaws
should
are.
work,
Right.
the way it should work, I think, is a town manager should be saying, gee, this might be easier if it worked this way. And then the selectmen would say, gee, maybe you're right, maybe it would work better this way. We've had 7 years' experience, and we're here talking about these things, so we all have a different view of how government works and how things fit together. And the bottom line is that perception sometimes is not the fact. My perception and your perception is different spots.
He has
So
an
is
executive
there,
admin who could make
a lot
copies
of towns,
bylaws.
Groton in particular, they do we ever do public meetings by the FinCom? I mean, I know you can attend, you can be at any public meeting, not public meeting, I misspoke.
Absolutely,
A public hearing.
they have public hearings.
Okay.
They should,
Right, so and then
they should.
where then it's there, they're proposing not just that year, but they're also doing projections where, and it states how many need to be done. I like this here where it says the town manager shall simultaneously provide the publication of the general summary of the proposed budget in a local newspaper and via the town's website. Do we ever do that? I like that.
That has been discussed several times.
Come on, put it in the
Believe me,
paper.
and
I
it was
mean,
done once. It was,
Oh,
I tell you, the
great.
budget was done once in the town crier, and when you walked into the town meeting, it was in town hall, everybody had to pull out.
Yeah, right.
Everybody had to pull
So
out.
how
But
come it was done once?
I think that's,
I can't answer that question.
And it says the summary.
Nor would I.
But a summary would specifically
Nor can I.
indicate any major variations for current operating budgets. The town is very reactionary, and the word on the street is that there might be another 2.5. People are getting worried, and this is what is happening around the vibe. And so when you look at a 5-year projection, and if you're not attending school committee meetings, you could say, because there are those fixed costs, and there's
Well,
only that little sliver.
You're right.
of-
Most
so-
people, Most people do not understand that piece of the puzzle. That's the piece they don't
But
understand.
here's an example where Cohasset, which we don't have, has the powers of their elected boards and committees and their selectmen and their act also. And they actually tell their board of selectmen that they have to, prior to the budget cycle, put out a written statement.
But the-
So they actually mandate in their
Here's
act.
the problem. Here's the problem.
And we're not
Here's the problem.
We're not reacting every time.
Here's the dilemma.
The house is falling down, you know, that's.
Well, no, I understand this,
Let's be
guys.
proactive.
Well, here's the dilemma, and I'll be quite honest with you. The FinCom has never gotten something out in time for anybody to review. They never get it out in time. They're always waiting for it to be printed a week before the town meeting. If the FinCom worked just a little bit sooner,
With a digital age, there's no,
Well,
there's
that's,
really no
I do
excuse for
agree with that.
What's that?
With things being
just-
available
oh,
Everything
digitally.
being digital,
I'm just telling you, having experienced this the first year I was a selectman, the chairman of the FinCom came to me the week before the town meeting and told me they couldn't balance the budget. And they didn't know what they were gonna do. So Jim Bates and I sat down and went through the budget line by line and figured out how we could balance the budget. The bottom line was, they spend a lot of time beating people up, but they don't spend a lot of time putting stuff together so you as a citizen can see it before the town meeting.
so you're not at the meeting, like, and people, you know, running to the mic, and you have time to read, an open meeting, let's have it in the paper.
That's the reason
We're all
why,
informed.
that's the reason why it worked out so well in the paper, because people could pull it out and read it, and so they
Right.
saw it before the town meeting, and they could see, gee, how come this and how come that? So, to that point, now, the warrant in Mendon is published in the paper for every town meeting.
Oh,
Every town meeting
Okay.
that they have has a warrant in the
So,
town
what,
crier.
they're more organized, what's the difference?
Right. Yeah, but I mean, but that's a bylaw. In the town of Mendon, it's a bylaw that has to be published in the local paper.
Well, here it is a bylaw here in Groton, so it says it has to be put in the paper.
Their charter, actually, it's.
So that's-
Sure, but it's right, come on.
So that, I mean, but
It's a
that's
budgeting
not,
and budget
for
message.
me to do that would be a conflict of interest. So, I mean, all I can tell you is what the facts are. But I can tell you that that's been a suggestion for a long time, and it's always,
Well, the town meeting, everything that's at town meeting is posted prior to the town meeting in, I think, 3 places of public. Town hall is one of them.
yes.
Right.
You can read whatever is there. You can request online prior to the meeting.
The warrant.
You can get the warrant.
The
But you
warrant,
can't get
right,
the
yes. You can get the, you're right. You can't get the budget, you can get the warrant.
The warrant,
Right, correct, right.
And the question is not the warrant, the question is the budget.
The question's a budget,
The
right.
budget's what people want to see.
So then there's
Yeah.
the rejection, we're
They can go
informed,
through
we're
it.
being proactive.
Well, if you
Well,
get
just the pub- you know.
if you get the proper budget information, which has the past 2 years and the past 3 or 4 years, and then you can figure out
Right.
what the
Yeah.
expense rate's gonna be.
Right, right.
So that can be an obvious to the most casual observer what's going on.
Yeah.
The dilemma is that when you get to the town meeting, you get a town budget and you get a town report. And, you know, and you go,
Well, I
okay,
think-
now I gotta figure this stuff
Yeah,
out.
yeah, you're,
I think one of the things that's very clear to me as we have this discussion, and it's helping me understand, is you can see why some of these communities, either in their charter or their special acts, have kind of dictated some of this as procedure, because once it's in the act,
Right.
it's really
Or
hard
written,
to
like-
not.
Or
follow.
it can be a bylaw. You can make a bylaw in this town to say it has to be posted in 15 places.
According-
And then to comply with the bylaw, then it's done. That's what Mendon's
So,
doing.
so we have an issue though, in the sense that I'm not sure I would throw so many things into the bylaw pile right now, because we already been talking about the personnel bylaws need a lot of work.
Different group.
I understand that. General bylaws, same thing though, they go through the same process. Different groups go through, they still gotta go to the floor.
Well, no, but what I'm saying, the
Everybody
review
voted.
and the suggestion for the bylaw for the personnel board would be personnel bylaws, which would be.
I guess my
personnel-
point is how many bylaws are we not doing, we're not following? I guess
Well-
it's a big question.
that is the
That's-
question.
That's a reasonable question, but that's not I mean, my point is that that's really not a
So
question
my point
relative
is
to
to you,
this.
the reason I'm bringing up it as a discussion point is do some of those more important things, AKA what affects all of our wallets, belong in our town manager act like we've seen in some other communities with a little more forecasting.
As I said, the dilemma you face is for, up until 7 years ago, this town, the bylaws and everything was wrapped around a three-man board of selectmen who managed the town. What we've changed now is they pushed that day-to-day management off to the town manager. They still maintain the responsibility of managing the town, but they manage the town through a manager, which, when you think about it, makes sense.
Yeah.
And the rules and regulations for the town manager are all here. And it's simple for for the governing body or for the citizens to put together and say, hey, this is what I want. This is what I want. And if there's enough people that sign it, then that goes to the town meeting and the governing body votes on it. So the voters or the governing body, or the voters, have a chance to modify the bylaws and add to it, which maybe some of the things that we talk about here
Yeah,
move right to that position.
right.
I would actually, and I would ask the committee to have a discussion point on this, as I would actually recommend that we take 2 or 3 of these other acts and the financial pieces that result in things related to planning and projecting, and recommend that the selectmen consider doing some of those things, and do they belong coming out of bylaws and going into an update to the act? I personally think this is an example where you're giving more clarity to the Board of Selectmen and the manager to do a better, more effective job.
I agree. I would agree.
One of the things you have to watch out for is that most of this stuff is done by volunteers. Tell me what, Finance Committee, but only 2 members are elected. The rest are volunteers. All our boards are volunteers. You push them. Right now, you have a hard time getting people. You push them, you're not gonna get them.
Actually, they've been doing, in general, they've had a good upswing in the last year with people stepping into committees, which is good. I mean, we've had a couple swings down, but Selectman Fleming in his testimony said, hey, we're having in the last year, we've had some of the biggest increases in committee participation by citizens
I've seen
in a long
increases,
time.
and I've
I know,
also
you've
seen
been able
some
to
on
see-
40 years
Yeah,
where you couldn't get any full membership to
Yeah.
boards. So,
well, that leads to a whole nother discussion that, I don't even want to go there.
That's not part
We
of it.
start changing government.
but when you tell a selectman to push a board,
Yeah.
be careful.
When you can't get enough people to run for the board or volunteer for a committee, then the community has to make a decision about empowering that through a career component.
I have
Now you're talking about lowering taxes and saying career
Ta-
component.
taxes are not part of this deal. This is,
Yeah.
this
No,
is,
it's
has
not
nothing
our
to do with
point.
it. That's not it. And here's what I say. I have every year for 25 years offered the selectmen space in the paper, and I think it's been used 3 times in 25 years. And that's a statement of fact. To put a quarter page to write whatever they want about.
Okay.
You know, what's going on in town, what's a major issue, what's happening.
In this day and age, it's not hard to get that out in any form of media,
And I can,
digital, print.
and it can go out twice, and I go out twice a month. So I could put, I give them
So
500 words, so.
I would recommend that we offer, and I brought an example of Cohasset, and we've had, this is a newer one because I went looking for communities that have made changes in the last 4 or 5 years. And I've come up with Cohasset, Hanover, and 1 or 2 other communities that are on their 2nd or 3rd additions to their acts.
Are you suggesting that you want to do the same thing that you espoused that this originally was done? You want to cut and paste? Is that what you're suggesting?
Not at all. That's the last thing I want to do is cut and
I'm
paste.
just busting your own.
I want somebody to write the sentences.
Don't look at me. Well, we don't play that game.
So, if anybody has any point, could we does anybody in the committee have a problem with offering those up as a point of action to the selectmen, and for this committee to have further discussion in the next meeting?
How about if we ask the selectmen to include in this particular section, a line that includes planning, indicating plan for the next 5 years, because that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And a mechanism to give people in advance the budget.
I would only say that I'm not as amenable to that, because
Too.
as I grabbed these and looked at a couple towns, and I went back and started looking at our bylaws, and I feel like I'm like you, I'll spend a lot of time looking around and studying things. I kind of felt a little like, boy, this is discombobulated. So I would rather we give them examples of communities that do that. And you're right, at this point, I think that there's an opportunity for the selectmen to change the way that they've been communicating the budget. We all have brought up examples on this committee tonight.
Okay, well, then what we should
There's
do-
a lot of ways that they can do
Okay, then
it more
why don't-
effectively and better and more efficiently.
What issues do we want to include in this? What do we want to include?
I personally think that the forecasting and planning part of it is probably the number one.
So 5-year forecast on expenses and capital?
Yeah, everything, revenue,
Well,
expenses, and capital.
revenue.
Shape
I think it's
capital
important.
budget.
I love it. Do you know how easy revenue is to predict? This year we have a building boom. Next year we have none. That has like a $300,000 or $400,000 impact on the budget. And Prop 2.5 only gives you $250,000 or $300,000. And
They can just project that
schools-
alone.
The school,
They can just project that alone for 5 years. In this day and age with data analytics and spreadsheets, you can predict all kinds of stuff
I would,
with ease,
I
actually.
would say that, yeah, okay. Having watched what was going to happen.
I would agree that once you go out past year 2, 3, or 4, or 5, you don't know, but at least you know if your community doesn't change one bit.
Correct.
You'll know where you are in year 5, just doing Prop 2.5s on your current community.
Prop 2.5, but remember, budget, your fixed costs go up, expenses go up, and I'm telling you right now, the
That's why
fixed
the
costs
forecast.
go up faster than the Prop 2.5 goes up, and the schools suck up the Prop 2.5 to begin with. 68% of your budget goes to schools to begin with. So you're really,
54.
A little sliver, it's just a...
you have,
54.
it's changed now.
According to ClearGov, on our own data on our website. We
Well,
only
that's
54%, and we're still
That's-
3% behind our state mandate.
Um,
And interestingly enough, and I talked to Phil Desutter, one of our representatives, Mendon has almost closed the gap on their mandate. We have not. I was kind of stunned by that one.
Well,
For the community that has, in the
Well,
20 years I lived here, been the ardent supporter for every
Do
override.
you understand that they get overburden aid?
No, I'm just saying,
Do you know what overburden aid is? You don't know what
the
overburden,
money
And you
from
no, overburden aid is, overburden
their
aid.
chair sheet.
No, overburden aid is a number that's generated based on the gap between you and your levy limit. Okay? The closer you are to the levy limit you are, the more overburden aid you get.
Okay.
And so we're a ways from the levy limit, so we don't get much overburden aid. So that's another contributor. It's an 80-page calculation to calculate what we get.
My point is in this day and age, this is all getting into a world where you're going to venture into this point. But I personally think the planning is important. Interestingly
let's-
enough,
then
I think it's important. I don't think it belongs buried in our bylaws, personally.
Well, then
Humble opinion.
write a suggestion, write 2 lines or 1 line that asks to include 5-year planning on capital budget expenditures and 5-year planning on,
So I'll do the
revenue.
same thing for the next meeting.
yeah, just
I will take some sections.
don't make it too long.
I won't.
Got to be like, keep it simple. Because I can't
Any
read.
other questions or discussion on
Does
160,
that make sense?
159 through 164?
That make sense?
So the discussion on that is
Your wife
really.
is?
Similar to what we just given an example, I would pull from 2 of those communities examples. And it's going to be based about forecasting and planning.
Teach you to stick your head in places you shouldn't stick it.
We're ready.
So we're handling with that one, right?
Yep,
So now- Man, we're kicking.
187, we're kicking.
Well, what is this? During the.
This is an easy one.
Yeah, what's wrong with this?
There's no such thing as a transition period anymore, we're long gone.
It's done, that's
The
it.
entire section can be blown away.
Take that out. Well, we don't have to change it. Just leave it.
Yeah. When you go to change the act, you would take it.
If they change the other stuff, then they add that to the change.
Correct.
You're assuming they're gonna,
I said when they go to change the act, when
If they-
we as a community
if we do
vote
that.
and to change the act, you would take it.
Now, 209.
Hold on for a second. Any other questions on 187 through 191?
What is that you're omitting? What's happening?
It was a section that was specifically added for the original transition
Oh,
period
right.
of the act.
That,
So, in simple point for the meeting minutes,
the fat lady's already come up on stage.
Okay.
Sung and left.
come and gone, it's a piece of language that can disappear when the time is appropriate.
When the time is right, or left, whichever. Haw and G, depending if you're running a team of horses. You
So
never did.
209.
What's 209? That's an empty,
I didn't even know we were doing anything, that was it.
209 was things that
Nothing.
aren't in the act.
oh,
Yeah, right, yes.
Okay.
Things that aren't in the
I
end.
didn't realize that.
And.
Oh,
oh, this ought to be good.
wait, so,
So we're one of the few communities that, in my research, that doesn't talk a lot about our Board of Selectmen and our elected and appointed boards with regard to our town manager's position and its role.
Well, the elected committees and commissions, the elected committees and commissions don't report to the town manager. So that's a moot point.
There's actually, I mean, I brought an example, because I've been thinking of that and saying, is that truly a new point? And there's one community, Hanover, that basically says that there's an accountability component to the town manager of all elected and appointed boards.
Well, I won't buy into that. I would.
You wouldn't buy into that?
I would not buy into that. The governing body, the voters and governing body, the voters elected him to the Board of, to the Board of
Oh,
Health.
absolutely. No question about that.
So he reports to the voters. He doesn't report to the town manager. He reports directly to the voters because they elected him. Okay? That's the way the government works. Now, if you want the town Board of Health or any other elected committee to report to the town manager, then that committee has to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and that's a charter change.
Mhm.
So I can tell you right now, I don't support that.
So this one community basically says that you have an accountability to the town manager.
I have accountability to the voters. I don't have, and if he lives in town, he's a voter. If he doesn't live in town, I'm not accountable. I'm accountable to you.
Mhm.
You can't make it any more accountable than that.
You're the voter,
You're the voter, and I'm accountable to
you're my
you.
boss.
Just like the Board of Selectmen. Just like the library committee,
Yeah.
library board.
Anybody elected by the people does not fall under the Board of Selectmen. They listen because they have employees. Employees are under the town manager. But the actual individual, I have employees in the Board of Health. And
So their day-to-day responsibilities are ours, but their salaries and that are governed by, or controlled by the personnel board and the personnel regulations.
And it works very well.
I don't think that you want that. You do not want the Board of Health to be politically driven.
No.
And if the Board of Health reported to the Board of Selectmen through the town manager, it would be politically driven. Because the Board of Health charge is the safety and protection of the health of the citizens of the town of Upton. And that should be their only responsibility, their responsibility. If you make it a political position, then it becomes a little more difficult. And
Yeah,
Grafton's
I'm-
having that big problem right now because they have an appointed board. And so people are not being put on that board because they don't agree with the selectmen, so bing. Now that's changed because the Board of Selectmen over there has changed a little bit. But it can run afoul really quick.
Yeah, I'm not at all making that recommendation of changing those things. Like I said, the only time that I think that the community, my personal opinion, is when we can't attract people to run for the position.
Then what
Then I
can,
know, like, for example, the Board of Health in your chapter 111 there's like 32A through G or F.
Oh,
There's like 10 different options the community can implement.
The Board of Health,
to do
there's
things.
and the Board, also people don't realize, the Board of Health gets its authority from the state, not the town.
Yeah, no, like,
Yeah.
that's how the state gives you, it's like a menu of how you want to structure your
Right,
Board of Health.
right.
And our expenses,
I don't want to talk about it. I don't
All
want
right,
to
all
talk.
from fees?
I don't want to talk.
our expenses,
I don't know.
we go directly to the people with our expenses.
Right.
We choose to go through normal procedures, through the finance committee, through the personnel board. We honor that, but we don't have to.
Interestingly enough, there are two places where you can put on the recap sheet, you can overspend your budget. The first place is snow removal, and the second place is the
Public
Board
health
of...
emergency.
Public emergency. If the Board of Health determines, if the state determines it's a Board of an
If
emergency...
we get a declaration from FEMA,
Or
the
no,
gov- the governor or FEMA.
Governor, then the Board of Health can do whatever it has
well,
to
the
do.
difference is the governor never will send us a nickel. As soon as the FEMA declaration, Uncle Sam will write us a check.
Yeah, well, that's...
Out of its great credit line.
So, I mean, the long and short of it is that you run into political appointments as opposed to appointments that the governing, this board of, your voters want. And that's
Yeah.
the dilemma. And that's why I'm diametrically opposed to it.
No, I think to be honest with you, one of the reasons I bring that up is when you look at the communities that took time to put that in their act, they really spell that out pretty well. And the only thing they talk about with the manager was what you guys just said is being done, and I'm not sure if it's been done from, it's in the act. It's a little more specific in the act.
Yeah, the dilemma is that to change that would be a charter change.
No, not necessarily. These are all, I was surprised that there's a bunch of acts that are written this way.
Well, maybe.
Special acts that look a little more like a charter, but aren't necessarily a 43B charter change. I would agree. The 43B charter change,
That would
there would
change.
have to be a lot more citizens that are excited and willing to jump up and do this than the small group of 9 of us.
No, and you got, there's certain specifications on, you have
It has to be elected, 9, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
you have 18 months to get the job
And
done.
it's a nightmare. And the only person.
So basically, it says things like this: the powers, duties, and responsibilities of elected and appointed officials shall be as provided by general law, special acts, laws, votes of the towns, except otherwise expressly provided herein.
Well, the sewer commission,
And here's the thing that it says: notwithstanding the election by voters of the town of the officers named in the section, such officers shall be available to the town manager for consultation, conference, and discussion on matters relating to the officers' respective offices. You guys are both former selectmen, so I understand why you can walk in and easily interact with the manager or the
Yeah.
board pretty easy. But what happens when we don't have 2 of our 3 people on our board of selectmen, board of health?
that's a good question, but
Former
in point of fact, that's one of the reasons why there was a change in the Board of Health. I can't remember when, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever I got on, all the board of selectmen, they all quit. They all
I
quit.
hate when they all quit.
They all quit.
Somebody's not doing
Various-
something right now.
Very different reasons, but they all quit, and so there was no Board of Health. So I got a call, what'd you do? Sure, I'll get on the Board of Health. So I got on the Board of Health. And the very first night that I was on the Board of Health, the railroad started.
Yeah. So the last sentence of that section says, the town manager may require all such officials except the Board of Selectmen to prepare reports for the town manager necessary for the administration of any of the town manager's responsibilities. So it kind of goes to what you just said. It basically puts in writing that the manager does have some administrative
Responsibility.
responsibility and even a little bit of authority, probably purely as relates to personnel in your budget. That's about it. Other
Well,
than that, it's,
Well, really, no.
the budget, we submit the budget to the
choose to
FinCom. We submit the budget to
if you
the
don't submit a
FinCom.
budget, you won't have an office.
Right, we don't, no, we don't, if we don't submit a budget, we don't get any money. We submit a budget to the FinCom puts it on the warrant with the rest of and then it goes to the governing body to vote on. And we have been more than generous with what we've cut out of the budget.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and our expenses are pretty simple.
So same thing with section 2, it gets into the Board of Selectmen, and it basically talks about a lot of things that we've been talking about
Yeah, but
that
the Board
aren't
of,
clear.
yeah, but the Board of Selectmen's charge is very specifically spelled out in the state laws. I mean,
Unless there's some
so
specific edits from.
you can't make a change that weakens the law.
No.
You can only make a change that strengthens it,
Or clarifies it. Yeah,
clarifies it, which, you know,
same, one of the
same.
same.
So the long and short of
I
it is.
personally think when you clarify something and make it more precise, it definitely provides
Okay,
strength.
okay, so the long and short of it is really, the selectman's job and charge is specifically spelled out in the state laws and the charter and how our government's set up a long time ago.
Yeah, so I went looking for, again, Cohasset was one of the better examples. Groton's got similar things. Here's an example: the Board of Selectmen shall serve as the chief goal-setting and policy-making body of the town, and shall not normally administer the day-to-day affairs of the town. The Board of Selectmen shall set guidelines and policy directives that are to be implemented by the town manager and by other officers and employees appointed by or under its authority. The Board of Selectmen shall have the power to enact rules and regulations to implement policy and to issue interpretations of rules and regulations.
If you want
That's in the
to
Town
get,
Manager Act?
Yeah?
if you want to get all that information, you go to the Selectmen's Handbook. Every selectman
Selectmen's
that,
handbook too?
yes,
Oh, yeah, there's all
there is,
kinds of stuff.
with all the
Boy, this town
regulations that they have to
manager,
follow.
I didn't know there was a select.
It
He knows
is
that.
not simple.
MMA will provide
Puts
it.
it up.
Yeah. So this is,
Why not
those are the only
put
things
it
that I personally think.
Because they are
are missing.
already under the regulations.
Well, what I'm suggesting is, I understand what you're saying, but all that stuff, if you ask Bob Fleming, I'm not sure about well, probably Gary would understand, I'm not sure. But if you ask them they would probably describe all that stuff you just read
Yeah.
as their responsibilities. Okay? So and the next question is, is that part of the Town Manager Act, or is that something that we describe the
Well,
Board of Selectmen?
It goes to authority, it goes to the town manager's authority within the town.
Well, the
So
Town Manager.
that sort of spells out.
Well, it already describes it, he reports to the Board of Selectmen. So, in the town manager's ask, we're going to describe what his boss has to do? Does that make sense? When you write a job description, do you include the boss's job description? No.
I'm surprised that it's that specific on what the Board of
That,
Selectmen do.
yeah, see, that's my cut out is, if I'm writing a job description for you, I don't put my job description in it also. I write your job description.
I personally don't think that this kind of stuff belongs in job descriptions. It's more framework things.
But that's what this really
I
is.
think once you have the framework, it helps you write job descriptions.
I think
I mean-
that's what this really is. It's a legal job description, but that's not what we're here to evaluate. But I just don't think you
I
include
just, what I thought was interesting is several communities that are on Rev 2 or 3 have special, they didn't go to the 43B for whatever reason, so they didn't go charter, but they grew, so the town of Hanover was an example of, they added these sections
How
in
big is the town?
2014.
How big is the town of Hanover?
It's like 12,000. So it's not like outside of the range and stuff like that. Cohasset's the same way. I think Cohasset originally became a town manager, managed town in 97, and this one I'm holding here is revision 3, from 97 until 2014. They had a third revision.
So I understand what you're saying, and I can appreciate that you want the selectmen to do those things. I'm just saying that I don't,
Seems like an odd place to put it.
yeah, I wouldn't write I don't write the boss's description, his job description in my job description. But I'm sure in the place you work, you get to write what your boss's job is. Oh, okay.
No.
I don't.
It's kind of interesting though. I haven't found a town manager act that has just pieces like ours. It tends to be more comprehensive.
Was it added on the third iteration? Do you know?
Hanover's was the second iteration, which they added the powers. And I think it comes down, oh, no, I think it simply cuts down to, and it's not, this isn't a knock on the manager, this isn't a knock on the Board of Selectmen. This is a change to the operating dynamic of our organization, is what this is, in my humble opinion. And I think in meeting general laws, and you appreciate this, you and I changed the fire department structure with a committee of 5 other people. And one of the big things that was very common was we had a board of fire engineers in the past. And the general laws just told them how to organize, never told them what to do and how to do it. So the general laws didn't really have. some of the things
Actually,
we
whether the
needed to do.
general laws did or the town bylaws did, the Board of Fire Engineers never listened to what we had to say anyway.
Yeah,
And very seldom did they ever show up to a meeting that we asked them to
they
come
didn't have enough meetings, and I would agree with that.
and give them the
And
update.
they actually were the people that helped
But if you really want to,
precipitate the change.
if you want to
which was a
really
good
talk to
thing.
a guy who has a good opinion, talk to Alan.
I remember.
So what about adding
It was
the?
a good change, though.
You
Yes.
know, the act gets reviewed every 5 years.
I think that's a great idea.
Which was not only Blythe's recommendation.
No, I think that's a great idea.
So would that be 209,
That's a 209 also.
review every 5 years?
Every 5 years, I think that's a great, I think that's a good
By
ad.
committee, okay.
The other thing that showed up in, that is in Cohasset's, that is not in ours, but we just did it, was a screening committee.
Yes,
So the citizens participate in some point in time in the selection of the manager in the change.
That's, you know, there again, that's something that should be put in the bylaws, personnel bylaws, I think. And the personnel should have been involved in some of the process, not all of it, but some of it.
I can't comment on that, so I'm not,
I don't know what the inclusion was or what the uninclusion was, I don't know any of that story, nor do I want to, actually.
so we have the 5-year review
right.
as a committee,
Yep, I agree with that.
and that's also a recommendation by the
Yep.
original first town manager, I think.
5-year review, I think it's a good idea, yep.
And then the question is the other part was screening committee, what we just did. So I would
I could put that in there.
put that in there and ask the selectmen to,
Right. I
and we can
agree.
give them an example of a community that has screening committee. It's the same thing, it reminds me a lot of what we just
So
did.
you wanted to specify who's going to do the review.
No, it just says that, it says that when you go to do a manager, you have to have a screening committee.
Right.
Ours currently, they can just say, no, we don't have to talk to you at all.
Review it, yeah.
If the 3 of us are gonna do it, and it doesn't matter.
So as far as this one, this one's about adding things.
Adding things.
Is it going to add a 5-year review?
And screening.
The question, well, we're having a
We
discussion.
haven't
about the
discussion on the
screening
screening committee yet. We haven't decided on that.
I would like to sit back and listen to the discussion. So I think that having a screening committee was the right thing to do, what they just did. And how they do it, I think that's, the one community, Cohasset's another example, it's in Groton's, it's in a few others. In the MMA white paper on Groton, it talks about having screening committees being part of the selection process
Yep.
as a way of having citizen participation. So there's inclusion. So it's, at the end of the day, our selectmen will choose that person no matter what,
Right.
and that's the right thing to do, it's the only legal thing to do. But, you know, saying you're gonna have a screening committee and putting that in there.
And you have the screening committee for the first town manager, that was made up of citizens, you know. I think you had a screening committee this time.
Right.
So
Why wouldn't we memorialize that?
I would put that in there.
Since we've already done it twice that way. Yes.
The citizens get a chance to be at the table, it's a major position for the town, I think it's important.
This, okay. I don't necessarily, I don't have an opinion one way or the other on this, actually. But the citizens are at the table. Citizens are always at the table.
True.
You elected a selectman to sit at the table.
Right.
So the citizens' representation this is a republic, so that means it's government by representation. So there's always a citizen at the table. You may not agree with the citizen at the table.
Right.
That can be a given. But that's, so to say there's not a citizen at the table is, there is a citizen at the table.
Like I said, I bring it forward as a committee recommendation just because we have one of our 3 selectmen is somebody who's been around for both situations and has been the person helped guiding that screening committee process. It would be great to capture that from you.
No, I think it's screening, I think we have enough, several professionals in town that could sit on a screening committee and be very good at it, so I don't have a problem with that, actually. How about you?
I was on the first one.
Yeah, well, yeah, we won't hold that against you. But moving.
There you go.
Hey, we chose 3.
Exactly.
So good.
And I think most all of them
That's right,
say,
you should-
the language in the few that we have examples of say just that. You basically just help choose the pool.
And that's, I mean, essentially, that's what a screening committee does. They
Yeah.
go through it all and select the best 3, or best 2 or 3. So it makes sense to do. I'm not opposed to it again.
You read through
I'm
all
not
of
opposed
these.
to it.
Yeah.
So we have, so what we're going to add is a review of, if we're all in agreement,
5-year.
5-year review of the act.
Is that an appropriate frequency?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Because I know that charters are mandated by law to be at 10, I believe.
I think,
Is that too far out?
Yeah, that's-
5,
Yeah,
10's
10's
too far out.
Okay.
and what do we
Just
do with
wanna
the
have-
personnel bylaws? I mean, the review committee for salaries. Is that 5 years?
5 years.
Yeah, it's 5 years. So I think, yeah,
Try it.
reclassification every 5 years. So I think 5 years.
Okay.
I think it's a good time. And then a screening committee.
do the screening committee.
Okay, that makes sense.
Are we forgetting anything, or those are just things?
No,
Okay?
I think
Good.
that's all.
So we've gone through the whole thing, now
We
we have
got
to
through
fight the battle.
everything.
Now, what you need to do, send a quick note to the Board of Selectmen.
Yes, because I was waiting to get to this point to give them a summary. Very, very patiently waiting to this point.
Because I know they want it. And I would guess that a copy of the minutes, I don't want to rush it. So that's not my goal. What kind of time frame do you think on the rough cut of the minutes? 5 days?
She's
That's-
doing this, great.
Yeah, that'd be super. And that way you can shoot a copy of the draft minutes along with what we've come.
I'm going to make sure that the 27th minutes and these minutes are in that package. And if the committee has no problem, I'd like to get with Steve again.
Steve who?
and Racketon,
Yeah.
and maybe Donna Marie, and the
Steve
3 of
who?
us. Racketon.
Oh, Steve Wright, yeah.
Yeah.
And expand and update his bullet list that he started.
Right.
So the
Thank you.
subcommittee,
This
so
was
this is a
good.
subcommittee.
So we're gonna, I had talked to Steve at last meeting about us meeting here at Town Hall on a Saturday morning in the conference room.
So here's what I suggest.
No quorum, but it's gonna be our job
I
to put
will,
together.
I would,
I think that's a great idea.
I think we should have a motion to establish this 3-person subcommittee.
Because you can't have it without it.
Yeah, so that makes it everything open and above board.
Okay,
So you should make the motion.
Make a motion, what's the subcommittee?
3-person committee to subcommittee to collate the things we've done. Does it make sense, collate?
yep.
Make a motion that we establish a 3-person subcommittee to review all of the
Recommendations.
Yeah.
changes and updates.
And perturbations. Oh, perturbations, that's a big word. I should use a smaller word.
So we have that first and seconded. So I know Steve has offered to do that.
Okay, so who are the other 2? You
I
and
will do it, and Donna Marie.
Donna Marie?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's the committee's form, and the motion's
So-
seconded, so who seconded it? Did you?
He did.
Good for you.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
Like I said, that subcommittee will do nothing but just produce a document.
A
We'll take
document.
no actions, no
Take no
deliberations.
actions. Actually, should,
Just meeting up of Dan, Don, Marie.
Yep, and Steve.
now, just out of curiosity, does it make sense to pass that by the rest of the committee, just, and it shouldn't be a big issue, but just so we all see it before it goes?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I absolutely
Oh, yeah.
would not
Okay.
buy anything that goes
Good.
out that we all haven't read.
Something in there.
It could speak to, absolutely.
Okay,
I want to fight with Alan.
makes sense, okay.
Yeah.
So
And if it does not pass muster by everybody,
No, they are.
it won't go. It won't go. We'll
They'll
wait
do it
for a
and
meeting.
send it out. Okay, super.
Okay?
And you can let the town manager know that it's coming, so he knows.
So I'll also let the committee know when we're meeting in case, so everybody understands.
Now, I'd like to, also, we need, no, did you get all that?
And she has a question.
You have a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Totally blank on it.
Oh, really? Wow, you can take shots for that.
Everybody. Okay, so the thing that you're gonna develop, you want to pacify everybody before it goes to the select
Right.
Is that considered an open meeting? We're going to do that at the next meeting?
Oh, no, just it's good, she makes a valid point.
Yeah.
The document has to
But it's a
go-
document, so we're not gonna vote on it. We're not take no action on it. We're just gonna we get to see it.
Get to see it.
We get to see
And
it.
if anybody doesn't like what's in there, it doesn't go,
It doesn't go. So we're not gonna vote on
So
it.
that doesn't have to be a meeting.
Yeah.
because there'll be no action.
There'll be no
Nothing-
action.
Nothing will happen.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
That's very important.
Well, we can talk amongst ourselves.
And no reply all. No reply all.
I don't- No, you actually shouldn't, you get it, don't reply at all.
At all.
Because then Uncle Sam or the state of Massachusetts will come to your house and go through your computer.
Yeah, I can have it.
Yeah, but then we have to have a meeting
Yes.
if we're gonna.
If we take any action.
If anybody takes a concern about what's put
Okay, so
posted,
we're talking, so really what we're talking about 5 days, let's say 6 days before we get the rough draft. And then how long will you guys take before you get your thing?
I would hope that we could do that in 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday morning. With 3 of us cranking away.
Okay, you'll have to schedule it through Steve. So my suspicion is it's gonna take at least 14 days.
Yep.
Okay, and 14 days happens to be the interval for the next meeting.
Correct.
Hey, how lucky is that?
But I don't want to jump on, yeah.
So what I'm-
Finish your thoughts.
So what I'm saying is,
The thing is, we can't comment on it,
Until
but we
we-
can say, we'll talk at the meeting.
right. And
Exactly.
then, so at least we know that the longest time is gonna be 14 days.
Right.
It can be shorter if no one says, gee, we need to put this on the agenda.
Correct.
Because that's a fair and reasonable request, put it on the
Correct.
agenda.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
that covers our bases. Good,
We have 4 corners. We're good.
okay. No, don't use 4 corners.
Sorry, I like that.
No, Dave, that's a,
I like Dave Mulper's 4 corners.
They always send the chairman and the co-chairman to jail, that's all.
It'll be a Saturday morning in the next couple of weeks. I don't want to speak for Steve.
so maybe,
He said he would work and that he thought that Saturday morning would work for him. And that Don
you
and
have
me both, I have to.
you'll
look at
have to,
calendars.
also have to understand that Steve is going through a pretty tough time in his family life, so be gentle on,
I will, absolutely.
Be very
yeah.
gentle.
In 5 days,
pardon?
so we need this draft.
No, 5 days will be fine. The
5 or
original
6
time you
days.
talked about, if
Yeah, 5 or 6 days will be fine.
you have it by next week, that'd
That's
be
fine.
perfect.
A week from today is fine.
You're not going to meet until.
No, a week from today is fine for the minutes. That's a week. That's-
Yep. So before we leave, we don't have the whole committee, but do we want to try to stay on that meeting tempo? I think we've been doing pretty good, about twice a month.
Every other week, which would make it on the 14th.
14th?
No, the 7th, sorry.
You know, the 7th might be a tough week because all of us, there's a bunch of us that have kids in school or going to
Hey,
college.
listen, life's a bitch and then you die, you know?
Open houses and whatnot.
As I say, life's a bitch and then you die.
Do we even know what the open house is?
Bureaucracy never stops.
I'm not going to be here from the 21st to the 30th. That doesn't mean I can't watch the recording.
Yeah, we'd rather have you here.
Okay, here's the question I have. The 14th won't work.
Yeah, I'm out of town.
Okay, the 14th won't work for us because we have a Board of Health meeting. So, and we slid all our Board of Health meetings around so we could meet the 14-day schedule.
Okay,
Please don't make me,
I won't do it. I believe it. I'm gonna go back through it until already
we meet on
once.
the 14th.
We went from the 14th.
And you're not available the 21st then?
Oh, we could meet
I'm
on,
leaving on the 21st and the.
we could meet on the 14th then, right? Is that what you're saying? Let's check with,
No, we don't, we can meet on the 14th, correct. We can't on the 21st because we
That's what-
scheduled
she's
our
going
meeting.
anyway, so.
So 14th, let's just tentatively, is that
Okay.
14th work for everybody for the tentative date? We
Okay,
got a
let's
bunch
make
of other
sure-
committee members that
You
need to
gonna see Diane tomorrow? Okay,
You're not
let's
here?
make sure that the 21st is okay.
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 And I would request that we get the posting done as soon as we confirm it. And the reason why I say that is because one member didn't come tonight because he's upset about the posting.
What?
Well, I'm being
Okay.
straightforward, so,
Are you
anyway.
kidding me?
Fair enough.
No, reasonably so.
We're coordinating, working with the selectmen for our administrative support.
Yeah?
You meant the 48 hours though, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't the issue.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought it was that.
And we had left the meeting, the previous meeting saying, let's all plan on being here on the 24th, so.
But anyway, in any case, the long and short of it is,
So I'll put tentative, and don't worry about dates, let me send out an email.
tomorrow, we will confirm that the 14th works. Okay,
Wait, did we say the 14th, the
Yeah.
21st?
14th,
We were talking about the 14th.
14th,
Okay, 14th for us, okay.
yeah. 21st is, I think, a Board of Health meeting.
September 14th is the BBT curriculum
And
night.
then do you plan on using it
We're not
again?
going to be here.
You need to submit something
9 and 11.
before the warrant, or you're all set with that? We don't need to do that.
Pardon?
We don't need to have anything ready for the warrant.
No, I don't think so.
Open now.
No, but we will know on the 14th, because the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager will beat us up if we do, so.
Yeah. From our earlier discussion, no.
You don't have to be at the BVT thing, your husband has to be there.
No, we're both in Orlando, because she had a shoot the whole week, so we're not there.
Oh, but the BVT thing,
That's not that's just the open house, it's not the advisory, but
okay.
I don't, I'll see when that is. I get to go to that first one.
Any other
I'm
days?
on that advisory, not the chair, but I'm
Which advisory?
the electronics, I'm on electronics advisory.
He's a
We're still gonna try to aim for October. We're talking about the end of October. So I'm gonna put 14th as a very tentative date, because it sounds like we may have a lot of conflicts.
Well, let's see what happens.
I'll
It
put
is-
out a few other dates after I coordinate with
I'm
Deb.
married, I can't, no dating.
No. A few other times.
So, yeah, I'm leaving
Okay,
on the 21st.
so we'll figure that out.
They
So,
let you have vacation?
I'm finally going away for vacation.
Good for you. Where are you going, any place exciting?
that's all I have.
Good for you, Myrtle Beach will be
There are no
fun.
events in September.
Well, I
Really?
can give you this. My mother lives down there, Merle's Inlet. It's great.
I'm there in hurricane.
Curriculum night.
We have one other item. Opportunity to hear from the public is our next agenda item.
What's that?
Oh.
Oh,
We have
yes.
Marcia,
You've been raising your hand all night, so go ahead.
and
I'm good with that, go ahead.
go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you to all of you, because I've read the Town Manager Act multiple times, came up with lots of questions, wondering why things aren't included, what do they mean by, I wish everybody in town could have heard this tonight, and I will recommend that everyone I know listen to this. I hope the recording's good.
Thank you.
So thank you, I really appreciate the work you do.
Thank you.
The other thing is the log. I know that that brings up concerns, but if there's some way to do it, that'd be wonderful for data mining. If you think about it, you have the town manager say they get calls after a snowstorm and there's 30 mailboxes down and curbs, and they go, well, 30 over the town, that's not bad. But if there were a log and then later on they look and they go, oh my God, this is over 4 streets.
Generally,
You might have a problem.
generally speaking, yeah, and you make a valid point, and from that one would be good. In that case, it would be good, but
More than one person.
But there's, and generally speaking, the town manager, I'm sure the town manager would respond to that, because that's happened on occasion, and there have been people who've gotten their mailboxes replaced or whatever, really.
No, I know.
But
Happens almost every storm. I
every
think.
storm, yeah, but the dilemma you face, there are those, if you kept a log, and you said you have to keep a log, then there would be those things in that log that you wouldn't want in the log, or individuals or citizens wouldn't want in the log. And I can think of a dozen at least, while I was a selectman, that wouldn't want to be in the log. And so, from that regard, you know, you have to depend to some extent on the town manager's ability to discern what's the right thing to carry forward and what's the wrong thing. And that you hope you hire the right guy to do that.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, to your point, Al, I think that you're going to continually face the anonymous complaints versus the non-anonymous complaints, the ones that people come forward. And we're living in a day and age where it's hard to not receive information. And
So,
to your point, just log it and process it,
Yeah, well,
so
I
you
can
can have a discussion and answer somebody with facts.
Yeah,
and
the
data.
dilemma you face is that, and I'm saying that maybe 5 or 10% of those complaints come in, you definitely don't want to put down on a log. You don't want those.
Yeah.
But if you say you have to keep a log, then they'd have to write everything down. And so then you run into an issue where it just wasn't,
Maybe town council could give us some advice?
yeah,
This is something too that the selectmen, for all we know,
Without embarrassing people,
yeah,
but getting,
they may have a clear opinion about this too.
they may, I mean, that's a
I
question.
would hope they would, actually.
I would think they would, should be an easy question.
But that's something that the selectmen, I mean, I would think the selectmen would want to drive this,
Yeah.
the town manager to follow.
And I really like the idea, if it's possible, to make sure that people know that at the end of the meeting, if people could speak publicly, that would be great.
Well, the dilemma with that, it's really up to the committee to whether or not they're going to allow a public comment section. The law is really very clear on that. The meeting is our meeting, and if, you're welcome to come, but we don't have to recognize comments. We can have our meeting and then get up and leave, and the meeting's over. The law says that you're allowed to watch and listen, but not participate. Now, most committees allow for a
Yeah.
comment at the end, just because it's courteous and we're all live in the same town. But sometimes that can get out of control. And that's when the chairman of the committee has to say, okay, we're through.
Yeah.
And I've been there too.
Okay. Because I was gonna say, maybe I could suggest that to those.
Well, the board of selectmen generally do that. They notice who's in the audience, and they'll allow for, public comment. Generally, they do that.
We did talk about, and some of the selectmen said they used to show up half an hour early and take citizen comments.
So
So,
if people don't know.
well, exactly, so we're trying to maybe gently nudge, maybe we can get that back, so that there could
There's
be
different
time.
ways of engagement. I've seen one of the community that does
You said nobody.
twice a month coffee hour
And it
with
was
the
in the
selectmen.
newspaper.
That's what they do.
The only person that shows up usually at those things is a newspaper reporter.
Right, to see what's going on.
That's generally
And
speaking.
another selectman to keep, there's a guy.
But a comment is, even though we don't have a personnel committee yet, the other person and I've suggested that we meet and go through the bylaws to understand them before we're actually meeting. So I will actually suggest we take the town manager act and start looking at it to see where the discrepancies are, and if we can get a copy of the notes, that would be most useful.
Well, you can have the minutes. You're absolutely welcome to the minutes. They're all matter of public record. You should be able to get those, no problem.
Has Kelly been posting all those up? I think we don't have July, but tonight we'll have through then in July up. And then you're only missing this meeting, so,
Just for a matter of clarification,
yeah,
the
we've
keeper of minutes and public notes is the town clerk.
clerk. Kelly McDonald, sorry.
Right, so if she ain't got them, they don't exist.
Yeah.
And if they don't exist, then the
Then
person.
you should ask her
then you should-
why.
I did that one
Call your
time,
selectman.
just as a point, just as a story. We once had a disabilities, disabled person who was the chairman of the disability committee. And that said person never missed a chance to take a shot at every selectman and every school committee member about disability. But when asked for her minutes, the person's minutes, we never got it. So I put in a formal request, and it turned out that she was 3 years behind. And I demanded minutes for those 3 years. It was an interesting,
Well, you're making friends there, Al, huh?
hey, listen.
Can we make a motion to adjourn?
Yes. See, no other discussion? We're done. Thank you. Good meeting, guys.